Chapter 672. Su Chan held Li Yundong's arm intimately and said with a smile, "What, you don't want to see me?" Li Yundong pinched the tip of the girl's nose with a smile and said, "Don't you need to protect Shen Wankai? If all three of you come over, won't there be no one there?" Su Chan's big black eyes rolled. For a moment she didn't know how to answer her master's words, so she turned to look at Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan for help. Soon, Li Yundong also followed her gaze and saw that Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan were looking at each other. They seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought as if they had something to say. Li Yundong smiled and said, "What are you standing at the door for? Come in. If someone sees you, they will think that I'm looking for a miss in the middle of the night." Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin had been worried about Xinyu and didn't know how to tell Li Yundong about it. They were a little nervous and worried, but at this time, Li Yundong's joke immediately drove away the worries in their hearts. Zi Yuan glared at Li Yundong angrily and said in a low voice, "What miss? Do we look like a miss?" Zhou Qin chuckled and said, "If we were a miss, how much should we charge you for coming in?" Li Yundong hadn't expected that the two of them would actually play along with his joke. He laughed and waved his hand saying, "There are peerless beauties who live in seclusion in an empty valley. One smile can topple a city and two smiles can topple a country. I can't afford to pay for you two fairies in the world." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? If Du Fu, the sage of poetry, knew that you had changed his poems like this, I'm afraid he would be so angry that he would jump out of his coffin." Su Chan pulled Li Yundong's arm and joined in the fun with a smile. She tapped her nose and whispered in his ear, "Hey master, I won't take your money." Li Yundong looked at Su Chan in surprise. "Did I say I would give you money? You really think too highly of yourself." Su Chan's face suddenly became long and she looked resentful. "You're so annoying. Am I worthless?" Li Yundong said seriously with a straight face, "Of course my girl is worthless. She's a priceless treasure." At first, Su Chan pouted, but when she heard the last sentence she suddenly smiled and giggled. Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan saw the couple flirting as if there was no one else around. They looked at each other and couldn't help thinking, if Xinyu succeeds, what will happen to Li Yundong? Such a consequence made the two of them shudder at the thought of it. For a moment they didn't know how to talk to Li Yundong. After a while, Zi Yuan whispered to Li Yundong, "Li Yundong, don't worry. Nothing will happen to Qin Wankai." Li Yunyang patted the little girl's head and motioned for her to sit aside. He sat up himself and said to Zi Yuan, "Of course I know. I can rest assured when you do things. You won't do things that make me worry like Chaner." "I'll be there soon, you're so annoying," Su Chan said angrily. "I know what I'm doing now, and I'm trying very hard not to cause trouble for you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Yes, thanks to you I'm still alive and well. I really should thank you properly. Immortal Su Chan." Su Chan shouted and pounced on Li Yundong, pinching and biting him. She said angrily, "I'm so angry. You don't even have a good word to say when you see me. You despise me, don't you?" Li Yundong and the little girl laughed for a while. Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan felt even more afraid and guilty when they saw that the two of them were glued to each other. Zhou Qin coughed dryly and said, "Master, in fact, we came together this time because there are a few things we want to tell you." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course I know. Something must have happened. That's why the three of you came together." Zhou Qin's expression was a little unnatural, and her usual sharp tongue had long disappeared. She hesitated and told him what had happened in Xinjiashing, then said in a low voice, "Master, it's my fault. If I had been vigilant enough, Su Chan wouldn't have been in such danger." At first, Li Yundong listened to Zhou Qin with a smile, but slowly the smile on his face gradually disappeared, replaced by a cold face and cold eyes. Unlike what Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan had imagined, Li Yundong did not fly into a rage like an angry beast. Instead, he chose to remain silent. At this time, the youngest great cultivator in the cultivation world already had his own majesty and bearing. When he was not smiling, just sitting there, his broad shoulders and strong back were like towering mountains. The pressure was amazing and his momentum was so strong that it was suffocating. Others did not dare to take a breath at all. It could be said that Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan had watched Li Yundong grow from a domineering and cheerful little boy to what he was today. Little by little, he had evolved into the Li Yundong that he was today. However, the longer they got along with him, the more they respected him. This kind of respect came from Li Yundong's brave and diligent cultivation, as well as his open and honest character and temperament. They didn't know when it had started, but in their hearts, Li Yundong was no longer a young and inexperienced little boy, but a great man who could carry the sky on his shoulders. Zhou Qin, who was not afraid of anything, looked at Li Yundong timidly. The abnormal behavior of the man she deeply loved in front of her made her a little nervous. She tentatively wanted to say something, but soon Li Yundong raised his hand and stopped her. He said in a deep voice, "Where is Shenyu? Where is he?" As soon as Li Yunyang spoke, both Ziyuan and Zhou Qin breathed a sigh of relief. Ziyuan took over the conversation and said, "Zhou Qin also went to look for Shenyu's whereabouts before, but he suddenly disappeared." Zhou Qin tracked him to the place where the blood disappeared and then disappeared. Li Yundong's face became even more gloomy. He said coldly, "Zhou Qin, I don't care what method you use, find him." Zhou Qin nodded hard, gritted her teeth and said, "Don't worry, I also want to kill this scumbag with my own hands." But soon she had an idea and said tentatively, "Master, do you think it's possible that someone from the Shen family secretly took Shenyu away? Was it just a ruse before?" Ziyuan was shocked and immediately glanced at Zhou Qin calmly, but Zhou Qin didn't seem to notice it at all. She was still staring at Li Yundong. Ziyuan knew that Zhou Qin could be said to be a person who didn't distinguish between good and evil. Her only value judgment was that she would believe whatever Li Yundong said. Whatever Li Yundong said, even if there was a volcanic cliff in front of her, she would still jump. Zhou Qin's words were equivalent to testing Li Yundong's mind. If Li Yundong had the intention of taking revenge on the Shen family, she would turn around and do it. Ziyuan saw Li Yundong glancing at Zhou Qin with a gloomy gaze. His expressionless face made her heart tremble. Ziyuan quickly tried to persuade him in a low voice, "Li Yundong, I know you are very angry, but you have to calm down. Don't hate the house and its crow. This matter is only Shenyu's fault. Don't implicate Shen Wankai." After a moment of silence, Li Yundong said slowly, "Ziyuan, don't worry. I'm not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. To be fair, Shen Wankai has handled this matter very fairly and I can't pick on him. But the reason why I insist that Zhou Qin find Shenyu is not for anything else, but that I have to let the world know that if someone wants to hurt the people around me, I have to make them pay the price with my own hands. If others insult me, bully me, curse me, or hate me, I will just treat it as a fleeting cloud and wave my hand." As he said this, Li Yundong's eyes narrowed and he said with a murderous look, "But if someone dares to touch a hair on the people around me, I will definitely kill them. Otherwise, if this kind of thing happens once, there will be a second time and then there will be a third time. In the future, if these things happen to you, what do you want me to do?" Zhou Qin's expression changed when she heard this, and her heart couldn't help pounding. She thought, the people around me that Master mentioned, are they also including me? Ziyuan's heart also skipped a beat, but she quickly covered up her momentary loss of composure by touching her ear. After calming down, she smiled slightly and said, "As the saying goes, Bodhisattva's heart can be shown with thunderous means. What you said is also very reasonable. However, I don't know where Shenyu is now. Where should we start to find him? I believe that Shen Wankai will not be stupid enough to protect his son." Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "Shen Wankai is a decisive and ambitious person. This kind of person. If we can't make friends with him, we must make sure that we can't become enemies. If we become enemies, we must make sure that we destroy this kind of enemy as soon as possible. Otherwise, there will be endless troubles in the future." Zhou Qin said softly, "Master, I think you can really consider taking Shen Wankai for your own use. No matter how you look at it, if he is on our side, he will be a great help to us." Li Yundong didn't comment. After he was silent for a while, Su Chan, who had been silent all this time, carefully pulled on Li Yundong's sleeve. She leaned over and whispered in Li Yundong's ear, "Master, don't be angry. I'm fine, aren't I? I'll be careful in the future. I won't eat anything that's not cooked for me. In this way nothing will happen. Okay." Li Yundong's gloomy face finally broke into a smile. "Hey, are you hinting that I should cook for you for the rest of my life?" Su Chan smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into a line. Okay, I like the food cooked by Yundong the most." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He pinched the flesh on the girl's cheek and said, When can you make me less worried?" Su Chan held Li Yundong's arm tightly. She rested her chin on Li Yundong's shoulder and whispered, "I know. I will be very careful in the future. I don't want to see you angry either. You were so scary just now. I was so scared that I didn't dare to breathe." Li Yundong tilted his head and looked at her. He said with a smile, "Are you afraid to see me angry? Do you dislike me?" Su Chan giggled and held Li Yundong's arm tighter and tighter. "No, although I was a little scared of you just now, I'm very happy to see you so worried about me. No matter what you become, I won't dislike you." Li Yundong's heart was filled with warmth. He looked at Su Chan and smiled gently. Yes, no matter what you become, I will never turn my back on you. This is what we agreed on. The two of them were intimate for a while as if there was no one else around. Li Yundong heard Zhou Qin cough next to him. Only then did he remember that there were two spectators next to him. He turned around and smiled apologetically, saying, I'm sorry to have made you watch a joke again. By the way, Ziyuan, you came at the right time. Come and have a look at this. As he said this, Li Yundong pushed the Vajra longevity skill he had read to Ziyuan. When Ziyuan had seen Li Yundong and Su Chan being intimate before, her heart had been sour and strange. An indescribable strange feeling lingered in her heart, making her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, when she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately stepped forward and diverted her attention. Ziyuan only took a glance and suddenly widened her eyes. Is this Master Zhang Zhishuan's Vajra longevity skill? Li Yundong laughed. I knew you knew who Zhang Zhishuan was. You really know all the sects in the cultivation world like the back of your hand. Ziyuan looked at Li Yundong in surprise. You don't know Master Zhang Zhishuan? Li Yundong laughed dryly. You know, I've only been cultivating for half a year. How could I know so many cultivators? If I hadn't met him yesterday, I wouldn't have known that there was such a person in this world. Ziyuan shook her head in disbelief. Master Zhang Zhishuan is one of the few old elders in the cultivation world of our Hua Taoist family. He is also a great cultivator recognized by the state. He used to be the people's representative of Baoji County in Shaanxi Province, the president of the National Taoist Association, the president of the Five Thunder Mountain Taoist Association in Hunan Province, and the executive director of the National Taoist Association. Zhou Qin was born in the officialdom, so she was particularly sensitive to these things. She widened her eyes and said, This person has a great background. Ziyuan said with a serious face, Not only does he have a strong background, but after he settled in Dingan County, Hainan, he promoted his Vajra longevity Kung Fu in the county, which set off a national health craze. Moreover, Dingan County has been influenced by Zhang Zhishuan for decades. The rate of centenarians in the county is far higher than the national average, and it is 22 times higher than the data standard of the United Nations for longevity. Su Chan exclaimed, Wow, that's amazing. How come I've never heard of such a great cultivator before? Li Yundong sighed and shook his head. Because he doesn't pursue fame and fortune at all, so he's not famous. Zhenren Zhang has blessed the world and doesn't cherish his treasures because of the sect's opinion. I'm not as good as him. Ziyuan looked at Li Yundong strangely. Why did Master Zhang Zhishuan pass on his Vajra longevity skill to you? Although Master Zhang Zhishuan has never cherished his treasures, and the Vajra longevity skill has been passed on to many disciples, this is the first time I've heard of him giving a book version of the Vajra longevity skill to others. You should know that this is a top cultivation method that can only be passed on to outsiders. When Li Yundong heard this, his respect for Master Zhang Zhishuan increased by another level. He told them about his encounter with Zhang Zhishuan with emotion, and then said, The reason why I called you here is that I was afraid that something would happen to me when I was wandering in the sky. At that time, no one would protect Chao Kefi and no one would protect me. That's why I asked you to come. Since you're here now, you might as well leave one of you to guard me. I've long wanted to try this realm of wandering in the sky and doing nothing in the void. For a cultivator, getting a precious cultivation method was no different from getting a drug addict. Ziyuan, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin naturally understood Li Yundong's current itch. Ziyuan smiled and said, It's okay. We're here. You can rest assured and meditate. Leave it to us. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Well, since you're all here, what else do I have to worry about? As he spoke, Li Yundong turned his head and nodded to Zhou Qin. Then he smiled at Su Chan and sat down cross-legged on the spot. Soon he entered an extremely deep meditation. However, not long after Li Yundong entered meditation, Su Chan suddenly let out a cry and exclaimed in a low voice, Oh, what if Yundong's mind is wandering and he forgets to come back? Ziyuan chuckled and said, No, although it's dangerous for the primordial spirit to travel, with Li Yundong's willpower and strength, he will definitely be able to avoid danger. It's just a matter of time before he wakes up. Su Chan looked at her eagerly and said, Yes, but what if, when the ceremony of your Linggong sect begins in 10 days, Yundong still hasn't woken up? What should we do? What if Yundong hadn't woken up by the time the Japanese came over? What if the mystical silver fox really appears at that time and Yundong still hasn't woken up? Su Chan asked 3 questions in a row, which immediately made Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, 2 women who were usually calm and had a lot of ideas, dumbfounded. The 3 of them looked at each other and thought in unison, Yes, What should we do if all of this comes together? Chapter 673. Su Chan's words made Ziyuan and Zhou Qin speechless. When they came to their senses, they smiled bitterly together. Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "There's nothing we can do about it. When my master used to be in meditation, sometimes he would wake up in a day or two, and sometimes he wouldn't wake up for a month or two. He didn't eat or drink at all, as if he was in hibernation." Zhou Qin asked in confusion, "Can't you wake him up? Just like the last time my master was lost in the spirit space, you went into the spirit space and brought him out?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "No, the spirit space is different from the spirit space. No matter how big the spirit space is, there is still a limit. The 3,000 small worlds in the burning thumb pot can be found one by one, but it will take a lot of time. However, the spirit space is equivalent to placing a person's yang spirit energy in the vast universe. At this time, a person is inconceivably small, and the universe is vast and boundless. Not only is it easy for cultivators to get lost, even if I want to find Li Yundong's yang spirit, I can't start, because I don't know which corner of the universe his yang spirit will fly to." Zhou Qin couldn't help but be shocked. "Then if we forcibly wake him up, it's useless?" Ziyuan sighed and said, "If we forcibly wake him up, it's very likely that he will be possessed by the devil. In the past, when my master was in a trance state, it was martial uncle Yanfang who stood guard by his side. Sometimes it was only a day or two, but sometimes it was as long as a month or two, and Shirbui Yanfang had to guard him for a month or two." As she spoke, Ziyuan said to Zhou Qin, "By the way, you should have heard of a poem. It's called, 'Under the Pine Tree I Asked the Boy,' saying that master had gone to pick herbs, only in this mountain deep in the clouds." Zhou Qin laughed and said, "Of course I know this poem, but Ziyuan, you..." Zhou Qin was also a very smart person. She quickly came to a realization and said, "You mean? Master is now in this kind of situation of only in this mountain deep in the clouds?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "Yes, Li Yundong has now reached the level of the Jinshin phase. His small universe and the universe of heaven and earth have begun to slowly understand each other and integrate with each other. This process is the process of picking herbs. We all know that he now exists in this universe, but we don't know where he is. Therefore, this poem is actually a kind of cultivation poem that hints at the realm of cultivation." Zhou Qin sighed with emotion and said, "No wonder Taoism has declined so much. When I read the Taoist classics before, my biggest feeling was that all kinds of Taoist cultivation classics were really mysterious and illusory. The worst thing was that the great cultivators in the past liked to use all kinds of metaphors to describe their cultivation methods. As a result, if future people followed the ancient books to cultivate according to the pictures, it was easy for them to go astray because of misunderstanding and become possessed by the devil. Unless there was a famous teacher to guide them, they might not be able to find the great way and cultivate the real method in their lifetime. Alas, I didn't expect this well-known poem to be a poem about cultivation." Ziyuan chuckled. "Jia Dao used to be a monk, so he can be considered half a cultivator. As for when Li Yundong will wake up from his meditation this time, it will depend on his luck. Now that the situation is so urgent, I think he also can't wait to improve his cultivation method, so he chose to meditate at this time." Zhou Qin asked, "What if the Linggong sect holds a succession ceremony at this time?" There was a flash of sadness in Ziyuan's eyes, but she quickly smiled and said, "The sect leader is just an illusory cloud. It doesn't matter if you miss it." Su Chan, who had been listening to their discussion about cultivation, suddenly said, "Sister Ziyuan, Sister Zhou Qin, why don't I take care of Yundong, and you two go take care of President Chao?" Zhou Qin immediately shook her head and said, "Su Chan, I'll take care of Master. You and Ziyuan will take care of President Chao." However, Ziyuan clapped the Vajra longevity skill in her hands and said, "With such a precious treasure in front of us, don't you want to learn and practice it?" Su Chan blinked and said, "Wasn't this passed on to Yundong by Master Zhang Zhishuan? Can we practice it?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "Since Master Zhang Zhishuan passed the classics to Li Yundong in written form, it means that he is not afraid of the Vajra longevity skill being spread out. On the contrary, I think Master Zhang Zhishuan also wants to spread this set of cultivation methods to the world. We mustn't let him down. He doesn't just give a set of ancient books to everyone he meets. This kind of opportunity doesn't come by all the time." Zhou Qin took the Vajra longevity skill from Ziyuan. At first she looked through it casually, but the more she looked at it, the more excited she became. After reading for a while, she suddenly closed the book, gritted her teeth and said, "No, I can't read it anymore. If I read it again, I also want to meditate." Ziyuan chuckled and said, "How about this? One of us will take turns staying here to practice cultivation methods while guarding Li Yundong. The other two will be responsible for taking care of Chow Kefi. What do you think? Su Chan clapped her hands and laughed. Good, that's a good idea. I'll take care of her for the first day. Just as Zi Yuan was about to speak, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Zhou Qin turned her head and shouted, "Come in, the door is not locked." After a while, the door was gently pushed open, and half of a beautiful girl's body poked through the door. She said weakly, "Li Yundong, isn't he in this room?" Zi Yuan took a look and saw that this girl was Lu Feier, the big star who had come with Yin Mingfan to congratulate the opening day of Desanxian. She smiled slightly and said, "Li Yundong lives here. What can I do for you?" Lu Feier looked at Zi Yuan with a face full of curiosity and muttered in her heart, "It's really strange. I should be the one asking you this, right? Why did you suddenly come here so early in the morning? Did you spend the night here? Jiske, this immortal Li is very romantic." However, she also knew that Li Yundong's relationship with them was far more distant than hers, so she smiled politely and said, "Our crew is already downstairs. It's about to go out. I came to ask if Li Yundong has gotten up. Didn't he say that he would go with us?" Zi Yuan laughed. She turned her head and said to Su Chan, "Su Chan, you stay here and guard Li Yundong. I'll go with Zhou Qin first." Su Chan nodded obediently and giggled. "Then I'll go take a shower first." After that, she tied her head up and rushed into the bathroom excitedly. Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin looked at each other and nodded. They walked to the door, and Zhou Qin smiled politely and reservedly at Lu Feier. "Miss Lu Feier, let's go. My master told me to take care of you." Lu Feier had seen that Zhao Yuzhen had been scared away by Li Yundong before. She had expected that Zhao Yuzhen would not appear in front of them again in a short period of time. Therefore, she had run up early this morning purely to find this mysterious immortal Li out of admiration. She wanted to spend more time with him. But who would have thought that she would see three stunning beauties in Li Yundong's room early in the morning, and each of them was as beautiful as her own. This really made Lu Feier feel very depressed. Although Lu Feier was unhappy, she was well cultivated. She didn't show it on her face at all. She smiled politely and brightly and said, "Well, welcome to our crew." As she said this, she led the two of them downstairs. Zi Yuan was relatively cold when dealing with people. When she met people from the secular world, she would not speak if she could. If it weren't for Li Yundong, she would not have set foot in the mortal world at all. Zhou Qin, on the other hand, used to be a maverick girl from a noble family. When she was enthusiastic, she was as hot as fire, and when she was indifferent, she was as cold as ice. Especially after cultivating, her temperament had become like a winter plum in the snow. At first, Lu Feier would talk to the two of them from time to time, trying to find something to talk about, but Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin were very cold when they met strangers. Although the two of them smiled politely every time they spoke and answered politely from their eyebrows and temperament, there was a kind of otherworldly aura that was superior to all living beings. Slowly, Lu Feier felt very bored as she spoke. She turned her face away in disappointment and stopped talking to Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin. She thought to herself, "You're so annoying. What is Immortal Li doing? It's so boring to face these two icy beauties." After they went down to the entrance of the hotel, Lu Feier saw Chow Kefi waiting at the door. She suddenly seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and quickly ran toward Chow Kefi, saying, "I don't know what your little enemy is doing." He found two beautiful women to be his stand-in. "Look, they are all acquaintances. You've seen them before." Chow Kefi looked over and was shocked. She quickly glared at Lu Feier and said, "What little enemy? How can you say such things? Nonsense." She hurried over to Zhou Qin and shook hands with her with a smile. "It turns out that the eldest daughter of the Zhou family has arrived. Sorry for not going out to meet you." As she said this, she nodded politely to Zi Yuan and smiled. Zhou Qin smiled and shook hands with Chow Kefi, but she stared at Chow Kefi carefully for a while without saying anything. Chow Kefi touched her cheek in confusion. "Is there anything on my face?" Zhou Qin came to her senses and smiled. "It's nothing. I'm a little too happy to see you again, President Chow. However, President Chow, I haven't seen you for a while, and you've become more beautiful." Chow Kefi covered her mouth and laughed. "Really? Well, even if what you said is true, I'm really flattered to be praised by the eldest daughter of the Zhou family. Get in the car. It's about to leave." Zhou Qin smiled and let Chow Kefi and Lu Feier get in the car first. Then she turned to look at Zi Yuan in confusion and said in a low voice, "Hasn't the mystical silver fox been possessed yet?" Zi Yuan looked serious. Under the cover of her body, she quickly took out the glass mirror of heaven from her sleeve and touched the surface of the mirror with her hand. Then Chao Kefi's figure quickly appeared on the surface of the mirror. Her figure was faintly floating with a few balls of light of different colors. After glancing at it, Ziyuan quickly wiped her hand again and erased the picture on the mirror. Then she hid the glass mirror of heaven. She said in a deep voice, "As I expected, the mystical silver fox has already been possessed. Now Chao Kefi has 2 souls and 4 spirits. In the past she only had 1 soul and 2 spirits." Zhou Qin was shocked. "Ah, how did you know? Why can't I see it? Did you see it with the glass mirror of heaven?" Ziyuan said in a low voice, "Every sect has some secrets. I heard that the secret of the Chuanjin dragon sect is the emperor's physiognomy. They can infer a person's fate through the skill of physiognomy. And the secret of the Jingyi school is the qi gazing technique. Whether it's the heaven qi, earth qi, mountain qi, water qi, human qi, dragon qi, 5 elements qi, or wealth qi, the great cultivators of the Jingyi school can see through them at a glance. That's why Master Zhang of the Jingyi school chose Mount Longhu, the best cultivation place in the world." Zhou Qin asked curiously, "What about your Linggong sect?" Ziyuan smiled proudly and said, "Our Linggong sect is good at the secret method of sound transmission and the art of identifying souls. In fact, this is also a disguised derivation of the qi-gazing technique of the Jingyi school, because the stronger a person's soul is, the stronger his aura will be, and the more prosperous the aura that can be reflected will be. At that time, Chao Kefi's aura was incredibly weak, so I deduced that her soul might be incomplete. Later, after secretly testing with the glass mirror of heaven, I confirmed this." Zhou Qin said, "But, if the mystical silver fox has already possessed Chao Kefi, why didn't she show it at all just now? Could it be that the mystical silver fox was born to be so good at acting? It's impossible, isn't it? Everyone can't be like Yan Fang, can they?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "I don't know. Maybe, the divine sense and memory of the mystical silver fox haven't awakened yet?" Zhou Qin was stunned. "What will happen if it awakens? What about Chao Kefi's divine sense and memory? Or what will happen to Chao Kefi?" Ziyuan's face darkened slightly. "It's very simple. There can't be 2 tigers on one mountain. Once the divine sense and memory of the mystical silver fox wake up, Chao Kefi's divine sense and memory will be mercilessly erased. The mystical silver fox is definitely not a soft-hearted person. Besides, if it were you, after being sealed for more than 1,000 years, would you politely give up the body of your remnant soul when you suddenly wake up?" Zhou Qin's face darkened slightly. She said with a worried look, "Oh no. If the mystical silver fox just wants to seize Chao Kefi's body, then we can help Chao Kefi's memory and divine sense rebuild her body. But if she wants to erase Chao Kefi's memory and divine sense, isn't that too much? If Master knew about it, he would never agree." Ziyuan naturally knew what kind of person Li Yundong was. She looked worriedly at Chao Kefi, who was talking happily with the rest of the crew in the car, and said in a low voice, "Yes. If Li Yundong finds out, what will he do? In addition, I'll make a friendly advertisement and recommend a book of my friend. // One Blood Evil Heavenly Demon. 10 years to build the foundation, 100 years to refine pills, and 1,000 years to ascend. What? Is it to break the shackles of fate or just to live forever?" There was a pool of peaches in the sink, and the little fox was holding a tender peach in her hand. A layer of skin had been rubbed off, and the crystal-clear juice was flowing out. She tilted her head and looked at herself in shock. Ling Yu looked at Ruan Hongling in confusion and asked, "Sister Hongling, what's wrong with you? Why are you so excited? What are you talking about?" Ruan Hongling's eyes widened. Her eyes scanned the bathroom like a radar, but she saw that the doors and windows were tightly shut. Apart from Ling Yu and the little fox, there was no one else inside. Ruan Hongling's heart skipped a beat and she thought to herself, "Oh no, did I make a mistake?" Ruan Hongling was extremely embarrassed. She stammered and said, "What were you talking about just now?" Ling Yu and the little fox were both shrewd and quickly reacted. They didn't reply. After they looked at each other, they began to laugh ambiguously. Their laughter was very sneaky and it was very hateful. Ruan Hongling was so angry that she glared at them. She bit the bullet and said, "I'm asking you, what were you talking about just now? What do you mean by touching the top and bottom? What do you mean by losing hair and running water? How can you say such vulgar words?" Ling Yu and the little fox couldn't help but burst into laughter. They laughed so hard that they swayed back and forth. Ling Yu picked up a peach from the sink and said with a smile, "That's right. I touched the top and bottom of this peach. If I touch it too much, won't it lose hair and run water?" After that, the two of them couldn't help but laugh again. The laughter of Ling Yu and the little fox made Ruan Hongling want to find a crack in the ground and hide in it. She was so embarrassed that her face and neck turned red. She stamped her feet and rushed out. Without saying a word, she rushed into her room and burrowed into the quilt like an ostrich. She covered her burning cheeks and pounded on the bed angrily. Damn it, these two girls must have done it on purpose. They're too hateful. After a while, Ruan Hongling heard another burst of laughter coming from outside the door. It was obvious that Ling Yu had told the other little foxes what had happened just now, making them laugh. Ruan Hongling was so angry that tears were about to fall from her eyes. She had never suffered such humiliation before. Bastards, bastards, a bunch of bastards. Ruan Hongling gritted her teeth and cursed in a low voice. But just as she was getting angry out of shame, she suddenly heard a shout from outside the door. Sister Hongling? Ruan Hongling was so ashamed and angry that she didn't want to answer them. She stuffed her ears with a pillow and said in a low voice, I don't want to hear it. I can't hear it. I can't hear it. Although the little fox's kung fu was not good, they were, after all, little spirits. It didn't take long for their shouts to not weaken. Instead, they became clearer and clearer in Ruan Hongling's ears. Ruan Hongling was furious. She suddenly sat up from the bed and roared, What are you shouting for? Wake up. Ruan Hongling's loud shout made the little fox's shouts disappear. After a long time, Ling Yu's voice came in from the door weakly. Sister Hongling, someone is looking for you. Ruan Hongling thought of her previous embarrassing situation and said angrily, Who's looking for me? Who would be looking for me at this time? I won't see anyone. Get out of here. As soon as Ruan Hongling's voice fell, she heard a low and angry snort. Humph, how domineering and powerful. Sure enough, you've been with evildoers for too long. Even your temper has grown. As soon as Ruan Hongling heard this voice, she immediately sat up from the bed and rushed out of the door like a gust of wind. As soon as she opened the door, she saw the little fox in the living room looking at the door as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Ling Yu also grabbed her arm and whispered, It's someone from the Jingyi school. Ruan Hongling's heart trembled. She took a deep breath and looked at the door, only to see Zhou Ping of the Jingyi school standing there, holding a golden invitation in her hands and looking at her with a sneer. When Zhou Ping saw Ruan Hongling coming out, she sneered, then turned around and left. Ruan Hongling shouted, Stop. What are you doing here? Zhou Ping sneered and said, Jinren Ruan, didn't you want to drive people away just now? Although I, Zhou Ping, am not a great person, I'm not a shameless person who won't leave even if others drive me away. After that, she stepped out of the door. Ruan Hongling was shocked and uncertain, especially when she saw the golden invitation in Zhou Ping's hand and the fearless look on her face. She couldn't help but shout again, Wait, what are you doing here? What's that in your hand? Zhou Ping stopped, turned her head and sneered, Do you care? Since you care, why did you drive me away indiscriminately just now? Ruan Hongling was unwilling to talk about what had happened before, but she was also shy and couldn't bring herself to apologize, so she stiffened her neck and said, You can't leave. You can't leave until you've made things clear. Zhou Ping laughed and said, What? Do you think you can make me stay? Ruan Hongling was stunned when she heard this. Although she had the immortal cloud-red caltrip handkerchief in her hand, Zhou Ping was not easy to deal with. If the two of them fought, winning or losing was a small matter, but if the two sects officially broke up or even went against each other, it would be very bad. Especially when the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect was imminent, if something happened at this time, it would be really giving others a handle. Ruan Hongling was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Chao Yi and Lu Yuehong had already come out when they heard the noise. The petite and beautiful Lu Yuehong glanced at Zhou Ping and said rudely, If she's not enough, what about me? Zhou Ping's eyes flashed with anger and she shouted, Do you want to win by numbers? Chao Yi snorted coldly. Win by numbers? This is the proud kung fu of the righteous sections. Wasn't it the same when you besieged our Fox Zen school? Zhou Ping said angrily, This is the grievance of our Jingyi school. It has nothing to do with the evildoers of your Fox Zen school. If you know what's good for you, leave quickly. When the little foxes of the Fox Zen school heard her call them evildoers, even a clay figurine would get angry. What's more, the two sects had already formed a lot of enmity before. The little foxes suddenly became furious and cursed, You're the evildoer. You kill people indiscriminately. If you're not an evildoer, what are you? You're a bad person. Get out. You're not welcome here. Shiji Ling Yu, you shouldn't have opened the door for such a person. However, Ruan Hongling had heard Zhou Ping's previous words. She suddenly had an idea and raised her hand, motioning for the little foxes to quiet down. She asked, You said that this is a matter of our Jingyi school? Are you here today? Is it because of the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect? Zhou Ping sneered and said, You're smart. Ruan Hongling's expression changed. She stretched out her hand and shouted, Give me the golden invitation. Zhou Ping sneered. Do you think you're invincible, Li? You want me to obediently hand it over with just a few words? Let me tell you, if you don't apologize today, don't even think about getting this golden invitation. If you have the ability, come and grab it. Ruan Hongling was so angry that her face turned pale. Ling Yu looked at Ruan Hongling apologetically and said softly, Sister Hongling, I'm sorry. If it weren't for us. Ruan Hongling immediately interrupted her and said in a low voice, It has nothing to do with you. The Jingyi school has always liked to make trouble for us. Ruan Hongling took a deep breath and repeated in her heart as if she were hypnotizing herself, A little impatience will spoil a great plan, and a little impatience will spoil a great plan. She calmed herself down, gritted her teeth and said, Jinren Zhou, I'm really sorry for offending you just now. Please give me the golden invitation for the sake of us both being disciples of the Jingyi school. When the little foxes saw Ruan Hongling lowering her head and apologizing, they immediately clamored, Don't apologize. If you don't want the golden invitation, then don't. What's the big deal? Zhou Ping laughed and said, It's not a big deal. It's just that without this golden invitation, you won't even be qualified to attend the ceremony of the Linggong sect. Moreover, I, Zhou Ping, traveled thousands of miles to deliver the golden invitation, but I was scolded and sent out. If this news gets out, how will all the cultivators in the world view your Linggong sect? Your Shiji Ziyuan still wants to be the next leader? Bah! Stop dreaming. Ling Yu jumped up and said angrily, It was just a misunderstanding. Sister Hongling was just joking with us. Who told you that? Don't think too highly of yourself. Zhou Ping was furious. Is it your turn to speak here? As she said this, she turned her head and glared at Ruan Hongling. Ruan Hongling, are you determined to give up? Hurry up and take the golden invitation according to etiquette. Ruan Hongling felt extremely wronged and angry. She forced a smile, bent down, raised her hands and said respectfully, Please give me the invitation. Zhou Ping snorted coldly and glanced at Ruan Hongling. That's more like it. Here, take it. After handing the golden invitation to Ruan Hongling, she glanced coldly at the other people of the Fox Zen school, smiled coldly and turned her head to leave. After she left, Ruan Hongling straightened up and stared at the golden invitation in her hand. For a moment she thought of how she and her Shiji had been living alone all these years. They had been guarding the Linggong sect, which was declining day by day, and had suffered the harassment and contempt of some people of the Jingyi school. Especially last time, Zhang Ling and the others of the Jingyi school had ransacked the cave of the Linggong sect in front of her, and even the souls of Yu Jiao and Zhuang Rong had been taken away. Such a great humiliation was really unforgettable. Thinking of this for a moment, Ruan Hongling felt sad. Her tears fell, splashing on the golden invitation drop by drop. The crystal tears rolled on the gilded invitation and fell to the ground. The little foxes on the side couldn't help but think of their own sex when they saw this. They felt the same way and began to cry. Ling Yu comforted Ruan Hongling in a low voice, Sister Hongling, don't cry. When the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect comes, we will definitely ask our leader to stand up for you. The other little foxes also said in unison, Yes, we support you, Sister Hongling. Lu Yuehong and Chao Yi also said resolutely, The Jingyi school has gone too far. Hongling, don't worry. We will definitely help you and Jinren Ziyuan. Ruan Hongling wiped her tears and forced a smile. It's okay. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about us. Come on, let's watch TV. Ruan Hongling quickly wiped her face, sat down on the sofa, and said to the little foxes with a forced smile, Let's not talk about these unhappy things. Let's watch TV. As she said this, she pressed the remote control and changed the channel while asking, What do you want to watch? Although the little foxes were heartless, they still knew what was going on. They said one after another, Sister Hongling, we'll watch whatever you want to watch. Ruan Hongling's heart was in a mess. There was nothing she wanted to watch, so she changed the channel aimlessly. The other little foxes also followed her thoughts and watched her change the channel. When they saw something they wanted to watch, they opened their mouths but swallowed back their words. But suddenly Ling Yu grabbed Ruan Hongling's arm and said, Hey Sister Hongling, turn back the channel. I seem to have seen a piece of news. Ruan Hongling was shocked. She came to her senses and rewound 2 channels. Suddenly, she saw a group of Japanese people worshipping and burning incense at the Cold Mountain Temple on the TV screen. This group of Japanese people was holding many banners and flags, and one of them was the most conspicuous, which read, "The Pioneer Group of the Friendly Exchange of the Japanese Cultivation World." After what had happened at the last Taoist assembly, Ruan Hongling had become a lot more vigilant about the cultivators of the Japanese cultivation world. When she saw this scene, she was suddenly stunned. She thought to herself, there are many traditions of communication in the Japanese Buddhist world, but many of these people are wearing the clothes of Shintoism, and some are even wearing the clothes of yin-yang masters. They are not Buddhist cultivators. How can they have a friendly exchange? Not only was she confused, but the little foxes also looked at each other in dismay. Ling Yu laughed and said, "Last time at the Taoist assembly, there were 3 Japanese people, one old, one young and one young. This time they came as a group? Do they think they are playing a large-scale game?" Ling Yu had been involved in the mortal world for a long time, and she knew more about fashionable things than ordinary people. Her casual words immediately made the other little foxes giggle. It doesn't matter how many people come. The sect leader alone can take care of all of them. The little foxes said this casually, but it immediately made Ruan Hongling's heart skip a beat. She thought to herself, why are the members of this group so complicated? Why didn't they come earlier or later? Why did they choose this time? What does it mean to be a pioneer group? Is there a successor group? Why did they collectively rush to our country at this time? Chapter 675. The collective visit of the Japanese cultivation group immediately attracted the attention of the high-level officials of Japan, and their nerves were also highly tense. In the decades since the founding of the People's Republic, the Japanese Buddhist world had often visited each other on a large scale because of the same root and the same source. In particular, in recent years, a series of large-scale pilgrimages carried out by the Japanese Buddhist sects were quite frequent. Since 1984, almost every year, the Japanese Shingon sect would visit the country, either for Buddhist exchanges, tourism, or pilgrimages. The more influential one was that in 2004, the Japanese Shingon sect organized a visiting group of about 350 people to visit Fujian and went on a pilgrimage to the Kaiyuan Temple in Fujian, where Master Hongfa had once lived. In addition, in January of the same year, Mount Koya University and the Hong Kong Buddhist Society jointly held a large-scale Buddhist exchange activity, leading the believers of Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan to walk the road of Konghai to the Holy Land of Tang. On April 9 of the same year, Master C.I. Yuan, the abbot of Mount Koya Shingon Tantric sect, once again started the pilgrimage of Master Hongfa to the Tang dynasty, which attracted the attention of the Japanese cultivation world. Not only the Shingon sect but also the Pure Land sect, the Tiantai sect, the Fahua sect, or other Japanese Buddhist sects had deep exchanges and contacts with the Chinese Buddhist cultivation world. For the high-level officials of Japan, this kind of activity was a common thing. However, it was the first time that the various sects of the Japanese cultivation world had mixed together and gone to the country under the banner of friendly exchanges. Although the high-level officials of Japan also believed that this group of cultivators would not do anything earth-shattering, such a group of great cultivators swaggered around, which made them extremely nervous. The Japanese cultivation world had deeply infiltrated the Japanese political scene, so the high-level officials of Japan could not organize this group of great cultivators to attack the hinterland of China aggressively. In desperation, they had to secretly greet the high-level officials of the country. "Boss, the cultivators here are a little naughty, and they want to go to your place to play. If they have any conflict with the local cultivators, it's none of our business." The Celestial Empire had always been relaxed in the open and monitored the cultivation world in the dark. Although they were vigilant in their hearts, they still agreed with the bearing of the Celestial Empire. "Don't worry, we have always been friends and neighbors. There won't be any conflict. Good neighborliness, harmony and stability are the main themes." However, the moment he hung up the phone, the higher-ups of the Fang clan issued an extremely strict order. They absolutely could not allow any form of friction between the two parties. Otherwise, if something happened and destroyed the current harmonious society and stable situation, they would have to bear the consequences. This order worried the officials of the Chinese Religious Council. They had been keeping a low profile all these years, afraid that they would appear in front of mortals and cause unnecessary trouble for the higher-ups. But now, this bunch of Japanese had really taken the wrong medicine. They had actually come to China in groups regardless of sect or religion. How were they going to receive them? Although the scandal caused by the Japanese cultivation world a while ago had been very strictly controlled, some of the news had more or less reached the ears of these officials. At first, they were still somewhat gloating, but soon the Japanese cultivation world that had gone berserk made them unable to laugh. In order to deal with this situation, the council held an emergency meeting. Representatives of the major cultivation sects gathered together to discuss how to deal with this difficulty with worried faces. Most of these representatives used to be the best of the various sects in the cultivation world, and most of them were even the lineal descendants of the major sections. They were originally full of sharp cultivators, but after being officials for a long time, they had been contaminated with the atmosphere of bureaucracy. When they spoke, they were full of clichés and official words. The meeting had been held for a whole day, but it was still full of lifelessness and lethargy. No matter how hard they tried, they could not come to a conclusion. After the discussion, a group of bureaucrats in the cultivation world and cultivators in the officialdom looked at each other and had no idea at all. At this time, Lu Chunping, the Secretary General of the Council who presided over the meeting, suddenly became a little annoyed. He slapped the table and shouted, "This is all your fault. How do you want to clean it up? Don't you have any idea?" Lu Chunping had a big head, big ears, and a big belly. He looked like a proper bureaucrat. He slammed his fat palm on the table, causing the teacups on the table to jump up. At the moment when the teacup was about to fall, the middle-aged man closest to him reached out like lightning and held it steady. He laughed in a low voice and said, "Secretary General Lu, don't worry. This matter actually has nothing to do with us. We didn't cause it. It's Li Yundong who caused it." A few years ago, Lu Chunping had been assigned to this position of frontier officialdom after the Tofu Project case of the bridge. Although he was not a high-ranking official, he could be regarded as an old fox in the officialdom. Naturally, he had a thorough understanding of the whole matter in advance. Of course, he knew who Li Yundong was. Although his position was a bluff, it was in name only. He was poor. The power of the Yamen was even smaller than that of the Secretary General of a county committee. Although he could be regarded as an official in the capital, who was behind Li Yundong, Li Yuanbo and Zhou Kechang. They were all high-ranking officials of the frontier. 200 years ago, they were all governors and inspector generals who had the power of life and death. What about him? At best, he was just a nobody in the Ministry of Rights, not even an assistant minister. Besides, the power of officialdom was intertwined and complicated. Who was standing behind Li Yuanbo and Zhou Kechang? Lu Chunping shuddered at the thought of it. How could he provoke such a character? It would have been better if the middle-aged man hadn't mentioned it. As soon as he did, he became angrier and angrier. He didn't accept the man's help to hold the teacup steady. He puffed up his eyes and shouted, "Nonsense, the focus now is how to deal with it. How to solve it. What's the use of investigating the problem?" His words made the representatives of the other sects look at each other and secretly curse in their hearts. "Didn't you start it just now? Humph, it's still you no matter what, it's still you no matter what." However, the representatives of the various sects had been in the officialdom for a long time, and they had all become very slippery. Although they were unhappy, they were all safe and sound like cowards. No one was willing to shoot the bird that stood out. Lu Chunping saw that everyone was like a gourd with its mouth cut off. He became more and more displeased. "Why are you all mute? Aren't you usually very talkative? Hey Taoist priest Qingyang. Didn't you always brag to me about how your Chuanjin dragon sect was? Why are you not willing to stand up at this time?" Taoist priest Qingyang, who was sitting next to him, was the man who had helped him hold the teacup steady before. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Secretary General Lu, this matter is too big. We can't handle it alone. Why don't you ask for the opinion of the Jingyi school?" The representative of the Jingyi school was Zhang Xianxing, the uncle of the Lady of the Earthly Fire. Although he was in his 80s, he looked no different from a person in his 40s. He had good ears and eyes, was strong and walked as fast as he could. However, when he heard Taoist priest Qingyang's words, he cursed in his heart and immediately pretended to be old, as if he had gone deaf at this moment. "What did you just say?" When the cultivators of the other sects saw that he was pretending to be deaf and dumb, they laughed in their hearts. Lu Chunping was so angry that he flew into a rage. He said angrily, "You won't say anything, will you? Well, then I'll make the decision myself." The representatives of the other sects suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and complimented him one after another. "Secretary General Lu, your idea must be good." Lu Chunping slapped the table and said angrily, "Bullsh *T, didn't you just pretend to be deaf and dumb? Why do you all know how to speak now? Do you still want to use the centralized democracy of our party? How are you going to lead the people like this?" A fat middle-aged monk chanted Buddha's name. Amitba, Secretary General Lu, as the saying goes, centralization of the people means that no matter what kind of people there are in the beginning, at the end of the day centralization of power is still the final goal. So you make the decision and we'll do as you say. Lu Chunping was so angry that he laughed. Master Shi Jingning, your words are very meaningful. Are you implying that we are a dictatorship? Shi Jingning hurriedly said, I don't dare, I don't dare. Lu Chunping said angrily, all of you usually boast about yourselves and your sections. Today in this kind of situation all of you are pretending to be cowards. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Aren't you afraid of taking responsibility? So you're throwing all the responsibility to me? Alright, I'll really take on this responsibility. No media is allowed to participate in this exchange activity of the Japanese cultivation world. In addition, all of you should inform your disciples to take it easy this time. Don't let anything happen. Otherwise, if things get out of hand you'll have to prepare to clean up after yourselves. When the representatives of the various sects heard this, they looked at each other and thought, take it easy? What do you mean by take it easy? This is too vague, isn't it? After Lu Chunping finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something and laughed proudly. He thought to himself, the higher-ups have thrown such a hot potato to me. Can't I throw it to someone else? Thinking of this, he said loudly, in addition, let the local provincial leaders of the religious world be responsible for receiving them. Anyway, wherever these Japanese go, let the local people of the religious world accompany them and serve them carefully. Taoist Master Qingyang said cautiously, Secretary General Lu, what does take it easy mean? What do you mean by take it easy? Lu Chunping was furious. Take it easy means take it easy. Don't you understand what I mean? After that, he slapped the table, scaring the representatives of the various sects and making them scratch their ears and cheeks, frowning. Before long, another Taoist asked in a low voice, Secretary General Lu, do you want us to fight? No, let's take it easy when we're learning from each other? Lu Chunping glanced at him and chuckled. Taoist Master Su Jing of Mount Qingqing is so clever. When the cultivators of the other sects heard this, they were suddenly shocked. Taoist Master Qingyang said, Secretary General Lu, there are many capable people in the Japanese cultivation world. If the two sides are serious about learning from each other, whether we can win or not is secondary, but if we take it easy. Lu Chunping immediately looked at him unhappily. Who said that you can win? Who allowed you to win? The cultivators of the various sects were suddenly stunned, and they could hardly believe their ears. Shi Jing said, Secretary General Lu, do you mean we can't win a single match? Lu Chunping snorted. What if someone dies when you guys start fighting? What if you injure or disable our Japanese friends? How can I explain it to them? Do you want to cause conflict and disputes between the two countries? Please, now the relationship between the two countries is so complicated. Can you not cause trouble for the country? The representatives of the various sects said angrily, but can we only be beaten? What if our people are injured, crippled, or even killed? Lu Chunping was furious and thought to himself, you guys have always been used to being lawless. If it were 40 years ago, all of you would have been beaten to a pulp. You wouldn't have had the chance to talk nonsense here. However, he knew that these words could not be said. If he said it, he would be in big trouble. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. A smile appeared on his face and he said in a gentle voice, that's not what I meant. I mean, you can just put on an act. Don't really fight, just pretend. It's not like you haven't done this kind of thing before. It's not a good thing to hurt someone on either side. You also know that it's not easy for the country to relax the religious policy. You don't want anything to happen at this time and force the country to tighten the policy again, do you? The representatives of the various sects and schools instantly went silent. All of them knew that it was the age of chaos right now. The cultivation world had declined to an unsightly state, and it was difficult for it to continue. Practically every single sect was trying their best to curry favor and develop with great difficulty. There was no one in the world who understood better than them the meaning of the people don't fight with the officials, and religious forces don't fight with the imperial forces. After a long time, Taoist priest Qingyang whispered, Secretary General Lu, it doesn't seem good to lose one game, does it? If it gets out, what will others think of us? Lu Chunping sneered. Get out? Who will spread it? Who will report it? Please, the ban is so strict. Who can spread this kind of news? Don't worry, no one will know. In this world, if no one knows, isn't it the same as not having a chance? Well, that's it. Who told you not to make a decision? Listen up, if there is any competition in this fellowship party, you can only lose, not win. Note. The country manages the cultivation world, which is to say the religious world, by the State Bureau of Religious Affairs and other agencies. The subordinate agency is the National Religious Association. In order to avoid suspicion, it was changed to a council. Therefore readers don't need to look into it. Thank you. In addition, if some readers think that this chapter is fake, how can there be such a brainless official? Before scolding people, please pay attention to the various relevant insider information of the State Sports Commission. You will find that the lower limit of brainlessness is even lower. As the saying goes, meat eaters are despicable. Chapter 676. What? You can't win? In the Supreme Elder Pavilion of Mount Qingqing, Zhang Huashui widened his eyes and shouted as if he couldn't believe his ears. Zhang Tongtian, the leader of the Qingqing sect, nodded with a cold face and said, "Yes, Sherbua just called me." Zhang Huashui suddenly jumped 3 feet high and shouted angrily in Sichuan dialect, "Which son of a bitch's idea is this? His head is broken. You can't win? F***CK the Immortals. How could he come up with such a stupid idea? Playing the zither, really playing the zither. Where's Sherbua? I'll call him now." Zhang Huashui was as hot-tempered as Zhang Fei. He angrily took out his mobile phone and was about to make a call, but Zhang Tongtian shouted in a deep voice, "Shirdi, what's the use of calling? This is the idea of the higher-ups. Do you want them to change their minds? Do you have such great ability? If you have such great ability, I'll let you be the sect leader, okay?" Zhang Huashui's neck was red. He panted and roared, "Do you want me to be beaten to my knees by these Japanese?" Zhang Tongtian's face was cold, and his eyes were full of anger. He clenched his fists tightly, and the power in his body was running wild, but there was no way to vent it. Seeing him like this, Zhang Huashui tried to persuade him, "Shirdi, how can you swallow this? Why should we listen to these sons of B***cheese? Asking me to throw the game and lose to the Japanese? I can't do that. When the time comes, I'll kill 1 or 2 of them with my own hands and let them know how powerful I am." Zhang Tongtian shouted angrily, "Shut up. Do you think you're eating and drinking? Do you think it's as simple as killing cultivators from other sects?" Zhang Huashui straightened his neck and said angrily, "Aren't the Japanese human beings?" Zhang Tongtian suppressed his anger, took a deep breath and said in a relatively calm voice, "Shirdi, now our Qingqing sect seems to be strong, but in fact we are strong on the outside. A while ago someone sneaked into our sect and killed dozens of people. We didn't even have time to fight back or warn them. Do you know how bad of an impact this has brought to our sect? It's not like you haven't seen how many people have left the sect these days." Zhang Tongtian's body trembled slightly. He said, "However, it doesn't matter. No matter how depressed we are still a cultivation sect that has been passed down for more than 1,000 years. As long as there is no disaster, we can reproduce and survive. We can pass on the cultivation of the Qingqing sect to the world forever. But do you know what the consequences are if you anger an official?" Zhang Huashui was not convinced and said angrily, "Aren't those officials polite when they see us? Whoever makes me unhappy, I won't let them have it easy either." Zhang Tongtian couldn't help shouting angrily, "Idiot! That's because you have value. People treat you as a person of importance, so they treat you politely. If you dare to take advantage of them, then you can go flip through the Taoist canon and flip through the historical records. Has there ever been a cultivation sect in history that could remain unscathed after offending the nobility? Yes, you, Zhang Huashui, are a great cultivator. At worst, you can go anywhere in the world. Even if your body is destroyed, you can live freely with your yang spirit. But what about your disciple? What about your disciple's family? What about the huge industry of Mount Qingqing? Can you move it away? Can you take it with you? How are you going to face your ancestors in the future?" Zhang Huashui stopped talking. He held back his anger and clenched his fists. Although he was a straightforward person, he was not an idiot. After calming down a little, he naturally understood that if he was really impulsive, not only would the cultivators of other sects attack him, but even his Shixiang and Sherbua in the capital would also turn against him and put righteousness before family. Zhang Huashui suppressed his anger and said, "Shixiang, what should we do?" Zhang Tongtian said with a cold face, "It's very simple. Just wait and see. Let's see how the Jingyi school will deal with it." Zhang Huashui remembered that there were more troublesome sects than them, such as the Jingyi school and the Chuanjin dragon sect. The anger in his heart suddenly dissipated a lot. He snorted and said, "At worst, I won't participate in this sorority. A get-together? What the hell? A group of Japanese people came to our country. What good can they do? Damn it, the brains of these officials are broken, and they're still bowing and scraping, acting so subservient. Damn it, do they think they will look up to us just because of this?" Zhang Tongtian didn't comment. He thought for a while and said, "Let's not talk about this for the time being. I believe that this news will soon spread throughout the cultivation world. At that time, it will not be our Qingqing sect who will be angry. Anyway, we won't be the first to stand out. Let's see what other sects do. If someone dares to fight for real and win, then we will fight for real and win. If no one dares to stand out, then we might as well hide. Anyway, it's not our family that will lose face. Zhang Huashui snorted angrily and stamped his foot. A hard blue brick under his foot was crushed like flour. He snorted angrily and said, I feel suffocated just thinking about it. Seeing that he was so angry, Zhang Tongtian couldn't help but persuade him, you'd better not think about it. Think about how to deal with Li Yundong at the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect. Zhang Huashui suddenly became angry. He laughed angrily and said, that son of a bitch, I've wanted to fight with him for a long time. It's a good time to settle old and new grudges together. On that day, I'm going to ask him why he wanted to kill the people of our Qingqing sect. Zhang Tongtian said in a low voice, the murderer may not be him. It's too early to draw a conclusion. Zhang Huashui snorted and said, even if it's not him, it must have something to do with him. It must have something to do with the Fox Zen school. He is the leader of the Fox Zen school. If we don't look for him, who else can we look for? Humph, it's fine if he doesn't come to the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect. If he does, I will definitely teach him a lesson. How dare a small Fox Zen school behave atrociously in Mount Qingqing? Zhang Tongtian didn't comment. After a while, he sighed slowly and said, yes, I'm afraid that he won't come. Just as Zhang Tongtian and Zhang Huashui were privately criticizing each other, the whole cultivation world in China was in an uproar because of the news that they could only lose and not win. Although the cultivators of all sects were seething with resentment for a while, the experienced and prudent cultivators of the sects quickly suppressed this resentment. In their opinion, since they could only lose, no one could laugh at each other and the news could not spread. The threat of the Japanese cultivation world was just a scourge. The upcoming inauguration ceremony of the head of the Linggong sect, which was about to be held by the Jingyi school, was a serious problem. If Ziyuan successfully took over as the head of the Linggong sect, how would the structure of the cultivation world evolve? Would she continue to follow the leadership of the Jingyi school? If Ziyuan failed to take over as the head of the Linggong sect, would the Jingyi school annex the Linggong sect? If the annexation was successful, how would the power structure of the cultivation world change? Moreover, in this inauguration ceremony, how would Li Wudi, who had a close personal relationship with Ziyuan, react? If he supported Ziyuan, what kind of changes would it cause? Regarding this, the cultivators of various sects could be said to have their eyes wide open. They held their breaths and waited for the arrival of the day of the succession ceremony. However, there were also many cultivators of all sects who didn't take the inauguration ceremony seriously. Instead, they took the collective visit of the Japanese cultivation group as a big deal. In the Longmen building of Tianan City, Du Fei was originally concentrating on dealing with the documents in front of him, but soon he was disturbed by a hurried knock on the door. He raised his head and said, "Please come in." Soon, the door of his office was pushed open by a young beauty in professional O1 clothes. Behind her stood a man with extremely sharp eyes. It was Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. When Du Fei saw them, he immediately frowned slightly. He turned his head and said to the secretary who was waiting for his signature, "You go out for a while." The secretary obediently retreated. When Wei Qing saw her close the door, she immediately rushed to the table, pressed her hands on the table and said angrily, "Shi Xiang, have you heard?" Du Fei put down his pen unhurriedly, leaned back in the large boss's chair and said, "What did you hear?" Wei Qing patted the document in front of him and said angrily, "You must know. Don't pretend. It's a matter where you can only lose and not win." Du Fei sighed. "As soon as I saw you two come in, I knew it was about this." "What? You don't expect me to turn the tide, do you?" Yu Sheng, who had always been quiet, also said in a deep voice, "Shi Xiang, you have a wide network of people. Maybe you can pass a message to the higher-ups." "How can this work? You can only lose and not win? How can you say such absurd words? What do you think the people of Huaxiu are?" Du Fei rubbed his temples with both hands and said with a bitter face, "You two are really hot-blooded. It's obvious that the officials don't want to be implicated, so they made this idea. However, you can't be so naive as to think that I can make them change the result just by passing a word to them, can you? Don't be kidding. You know how to save face, but don't the officials know? If you take back what you just said, aren't you just slapping him in the face?" Wei Qing's pretty face turned pale with anger. She said angrily, "Should we lose face? Shi Xiang, you are the most resourceful. Hurry up and think of a way. Du Fei waved his hand and said, there's no way at all. This is a dead end. If you can't do it, don't think about it. Well, at least I can't do it. Wei Qing's heart skipped a beat and she asked tentatively, then who can do it? Yu Sheng suddenly blurted out, Li Yundong? Wei Qing's eyes lit up. Yes, he must have a way. Seeing that she was about to turn around and leave, Du Fei immediately stopped her and said, hey, are you crazy? Don't you know that the Medicine King tripod made a lot of noise a while ago? Don't harm Li Yundong. He won't be able to solve this problem. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng looked at each other, and a trace of despair and unwillingness flashed in their eyes. Are we going to swallow our anger and be humiliated? Du Fei pondered for a while and said, go find someone. Maybe he has a way. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng quickly asked nervously, who? Chapter 677. Seeing the nervous expressions on Wei Qing and Yu Sheng's faces, Du Fei immediately laughed and said, you know this person too. He's our Shirbois. Wei Qing stamped her feet and said, Xixiang, there are several Shirbois. Which one is it? However, Yu Sheng suddenly had an idea and said tentatively, could it be Shirbois Mi Jingzi? Mi Jingzi was the Taoist name of Zhang Zhishuan, the abbot of Yuchan Palace in Hainan. When Du Fei heard this, he nodded approvingly at him and said, yes, Shirbois Mi Jingzi has a wide range of friends, and he once served as the executive director of the National Taoist Association. He is also a highly respected cultivator, so his words carry much more weight than mine. Go and ask him and see what he thinks. Wei Qing looked at Yu Sheng in surprise and laughed. You're a blockhead, but you're quite quick-witted today. Not bad. Yu Sheng snorted softly. Let's go and find Shirbois Mi Jingzi. After that, he turned around and walked out. Wei Qing quickly shouted, hey, wait for me. Wai Zhu, they were almost there. The two of them rushed to Dingan County in Hainan without stopping. By the time they arrived at Yuchan Palace, it was already a few hours later. Because they were from the same sect, Wei Qing and Yu Sheng arrived at Yuchan Palace. After seeing Zhang Zhishuan's two disciples and reporting their identities, they were immediately warmly received by the two Taoists, one tall and one short. The tall Taoist smiled and said, it turns out that the little Shirji of our sect is here. Please come in. What are you doing here? Zhang Zhishuan's seniority was extremely high, so his disciples' seniority had also risen. Therefore, when they saw the two cultivators of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect, one was young and handsome, and the other was young and lovely, they thought that they were a few generations lower than them. However, Wei Qing was unwilling to be at a disadvantage. She said angrily, you're the Shirji. Du Fei and we are fellow disciples. According to seniority, we should be of the same generation. The tall Taoist raised his head and laughed. Yes, then I'll call you little Shimmy. Wei Qing snorted. When did you enter this sect? Tell me. Maybe I'm your Shirbois. Yu Sheng couldn't stand it anymore. He glared at Wei Qing and said, stop it. We're here to look for Uncle Master Mi Jingzi. Who would have the time to dawdle here? When Wei Qing heard this, she made a face and said, well, for your sake, I won't care about this now. After that, she said to the short Taoist beside her with a smile, where's Shirbois Mi Jingzi? We need to talk to him about something. The short Taoist usually cultivated in seclusion with his senior martial brother in the Jade Toad Palace. He almost never stepped out of the door. He barely left the Ding'an district. Not to mention the outside world, he had not even seen many of his fellow Taoists in the cultivation world. Although Wei Qing's beauty was not as good as that of Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others, she was still a rare beauty. In particular, she was slender and well-proportioned, and her voice was as pleasant as a skylark's. Her smile almost made the short Taoist's soul disappear. He quickly calmed down and focused his mind. After calming himself down a little, he took Wei Qing and Yu Sheng to Zhang Zhishuan's residence. When they arrived at Zhang Zhishuan's residence, Wei Qing saw that Zhang Zhishuan lived in a rather simple bungalow. The doors and windows of the room were all made of wood, and the furnishings in the room were extremely simple. Except for a table, a few stools, a futon, a bed, and a sword hanging on the wall, there was nothing else. At a glance, Wei Qing saw that Zhang Zhishuan was standing in front of the table, holding a brush and writing calmly. She quickly stood to the side and took a look, only to see that he was writing a couplet. The first line was, stealing Kunlun longevity wine, but he was writing the second line. The short Taoist and the tall Taoist led Wei Qing and Yu Sheng to Zhang Zhishuan's room. When the tall Taoist saw that Zhang Zhishuan didn't even raise his head, as if he hadn't seen them, he couldn't help but say, Master, there are guests. Zhang Zhishuan remained silent and continued writing calmly. The tall Taoist said again, Master, they are junior martial brothers and sisters of the same sect. Wei Qing, who was standing to one side, immediately muttered in a low voice, it's hard to say who is older and who is younger. Zhang Zhishuan still didn't say anything, nor did he raise his head. However, he couldn't put down the brush for a long time. After waiting with them for a while, the short Taoist couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at his Shixiang, stepped forward, grabbed the brush from Zhang Zhishuan's hand and said, Master, there are guests. It's not good for you to neglect them like this, is it? Zhang Zhishuan finally raised his head. His sharp eyes, which seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, glanced at Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. He glared at his two disciples with a sullen face and said, Don't I have eyes? As he said this, he smiled at Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. So it's you. When you were young, I went to attend your master's apprenticeship ceremony. Wei Qing saw Zhang Zhishuan's sage-like face. Although he was only 100 years old, he was hale and hearty, and his eyes were sharp. Even young people like her were no match for him. She couldn't help but admire him and thought to herself, it's said that Shibuami Jingzi is a very low-key great cultivator. When the 5 masters of lightning retribution in the world were ranked, if he hadn't kept a low profile and not participated, I'm afraid that he would have had a place among the 5 masters of lightning retribution in the world. Even Yu Sheng, who was young and arrogant, restrained his spirit in front of Zhang Zhishuan. He bowed respectfully and then quickly told Zhang Zhishuan the purpose of their visit. After that, Wei Qing said, Shibuami Jingzi, now you're the only one who can stand up for him. Hurry up and think of a way. Zhang Zhishuan sighed softly, shook his head and didn't say anything. Soon. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng's hearts suddenly skipped a beat. Wei Qing knew that something was wrong and quickly asked, Shibua, what's wrong? Can't you do anything about it? Zhang Zhishuan sighed and said, There is a way, but I don't think it's the right way to decide everything by the outcome of a fight. The ultimate goal of cultivation is to live forever, ascend to immortality, and explore the ultimate mystery of the human body and the universe. I believe that when your master first taught you how to cultivate, it was not for you to fight, was it not? Wei Qing smiled bitterly and said, Shibua, now that the Japanese are right in front of us, what's the use of saying this? Hurry up and say hello to the higher-ups. They can only lose but they can't win. Who can bear this? Zhang Zhishuan was silent for a while, then suddenly said, I think you're mistaken about one thing. Wei Qing asked curiously, What is it? Zhang Zhishuan said, I know more or less about the Japanese cultivation world. Although the Japanese cultivation world has been stagnant in recent hundreds of years and has rarely made any progress, most of the power of Japanese cultivators comes from religious beliefs, so their power is inherited. Moreover, for thousands of years, the Japanese cultivation world has never been cut off. No matter how the situation in Japan changes, the Japanese cultivation world can always find a way out in the great changes, cater to the changes, make changes and further accumulate their own strength. On the other hand, the Wuxia cultivation world, which was at its peak during the Song, Yuan Ming and Ming dynasties, was once so powerful that the Japanese didn't even dare to look at us directly. But now, in the past 100 years, almost all the elites of the cultivation world have been lost. Alas, the river is going from bad to worse. Wei Qing was angry when she heard this. She argued, but Shibua, no matter what, we won't lose to these Japanese. If we can fight fairly, I don't believe that we will lose to them. Zhang Zhishuan glanced at Wei Qing and then at Yu Sheng. He smiled and said, Then answer me. Why couldn't you even beat a teenage girl at the Taoist assembly? Could it be that you 2 inner disciples are inferior to a little baby? Wei Qing blushed and said unconvincingly, She is the future goddess of the Tachibana family, not a nobody. Yu Sheng pondered for a while and said, Shibua, you mean, because the Japanese cultivation world has never been cut off for thousands of years, and it is a country where all the people believe in religion, the power of faith is extremely strong, so it is very easy for their cultivators to cultivate. Is that right? Zhang Zhishuan nodded. That's right. Except for a few great cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world who can overcome their narrow-minded racism and seriously and humbly learn from our Wuxia cultivation world and eventually cultivate to the highest realm, it is very difficult for the rest of the cultivators to step into the real peak realm. Do you know why? Yu Sheng said, Is it because it is too easy for them to get their strength, so when they cultivate to a higher realm in the future, they can't climb up? Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, You're a smart boy. Now do you know why many cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world have gone to Hua to learn from us over the years? Now some Japanese cultivators have also discovered this. They believe that only by learning from others can they achieve positive results. However, the views of such people are not valued in the Japanese cultivation world, and they are even severely suppressed. Wei Qing asked with a puzzled face, but, Sherbo, what does this have to do with what you said before? Zhang Zhishuan shook his head and sighed. There's something wrong with your comprehension. Didn't I say it before? The Japanese get their strength quickly and easily, so do you think that even if someone sets a rule for you that you can only lose and not win, you will definitely win? Wei Qing was very unhappy when she heard this. Sherbo, what do you mean? Isn't this boosting the morale of others and destroying our own prestige? Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, then do you know what it means to know yourself and know your enemy? Come on, let me ask you, are there any yin-yang masters among the Japanese cultivators who came this time? Wei Qing immediately nodded and said, yes. There are yin-yang masters from the Abe family and the Kumo family. Zhang Zhishuan asked again, these two families are yin-yang master families with hundreds or even thousands of years of tradition. Do you know who they are? Wei Qing said as if she was counting her family treasures, the patriarchs of the two families are here. Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, Abe is right, Kumo. These two are great masters in the Japanese cultivation world. Among the cultivators of the younger generation in the Hua cultivation world, no one is a match for them. As soon as he said this, his two disciples were immediately unhappy. The taller disciple shouted, Master, am I that old? No matter what, I am still a cultivator of the younger generation, right? How can I not beat these two old Japanese? Zhang Zhishuan glared at them and said, you two are Jinshin masters that I helped you open up your meridians with qi and countless elixirs. How many times have you fought? Apart from the number of times you have practiced with each other on a daily basis, can you count the number of fingers on your hands? You don't even have any actual combat experience, yet you want to fight with others? I'm laughing my head off. Do you know how dangerous it is to fight with masters of their level? If you are not careful, your body and soul will be destroyed. You two little Jinshin, what are you showing off for? It's as if you're afraid that others won't know. The tall Taoist and the short Taoist were blushing from his scolding. They kept quiet and kept quiet. Wei Qing, however, widened her eyes and looked at the two of them with new eyes. Wow, are you two Jinshin masters? That's amazing. Yu Xing looked at them enviously, but then he lowered his eyes, a trace of unwillingness and indignation flashing in them. Zhang Zhishuan shook his head and said to Wei Qing, don't pay attention to these two guys who have never seen the world. How dare they speak so arrogantly with a small Jinshin? They are really frogs at the bottom of a well. In addition to the Onmyoji, do you know who else in the Japanese cultivation world has come? Wei Qing thought for a moment and said, there are also the abbots of the Tiantai sect, the Pure Land sect, the Fahua sect, the True Word sect, and other Buddhist sects, as well as the great priests and goddesses of many Japanese Shinto cultivation sections. Zhang Zhishuan looked worried. He shook his head and said, this time they have come out in full force. All the masters of the Japanese cultivation world have come. Not to mention others, I have seen the sect master of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Kagumo. His cultivation is earth-shattering. Even I dare not say that I can win. As for the Pure Land sect, they are even more powerful. Their sect master, Masamura Siyuan, is a great cultivator. In the current cultivation world of China, I'm afraid that only the former Wang Yuanshan and the current Zhang Tianshi can match him. As for the others, alas. Wei Qing was dumbfounded and stammered, Sherbua, do you mean, even if we fight fairly we can't win? Zhang Zhishuan sighed and said, they came prepared as a group, but we are scattered sand. We are hindered from all sides, and we are besieged both internally and externally. Everyone has their own plans and every sect has their own plans. How should we deal with such a situation? Wei Qing straightened her neck and said, I don't believe that the Japanese are monolithic. There are many people from the Shinto sect here. The Shinto sect has always been at odds with the Buddhists. I don't believe that they can work together. Zhang Zhishuan said, you're right, but the power of the Shinto sect is still above that of the Japanese Buddhism. The great priest of the Ise Shinto, Ise Xingguang, is also a great cultivator. His strength is not inferior to that of Masamura Siyuan. The goddess Ise Chuyun is a weirdo in the Japanese female cultivation world. She is a genius that is rarely seen in 100 years. Moreover, she inherited the power of the gods of the Japanese Shinto sect. She is a female expert at the level of the Ksitigarbha goddess. In terms of fighting, except for Masako Tachibana, who can mobilize the power of the immortal Wisdom King, no one else is her match. Wei Qing was stunned. How could a little girl be more powerful than Zhang Tianshi? It can't be, can it? This is too exaggerated, isn't it? Zhang Zhishuan shook his head and said, No, the cultivators of the Shinto sect can only exert 100% of their strength in the shrine. Wei Qing patted her chest and said, I was scared to death. I thought that a young girl like her could beat Zhang Tianshi. That's really unreasonable. If Zhang Tianshi appears, will he be able to defeat the Japanese cultivators? Zhang Zhishuan shook his head again. No. Given Zhang Tianshi's character, he will definitely not come out of seclusion to take care of these things. Moreover, Zhang Tianshi has already passed the thunder tribulation, and the spring thunderstorm season is coming. At that time, it is very likely that he will break through the 9th stage of the thunder tribulation and reach the great way of the golden immortal. It can be said that he has already taken half a step into the immortal world. How could he care about these secular affairs? Wei Qing forced a smile and said, there must be someone who can deal with them, right? At least, Shibua, you can deal with them, right? However, Zhang Zhishuan had a rare serious expression on his face. He said slowly, no, I can't go. As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Qing, Yu Sheng and his 2 disciples immediately exclaimed, why? Chapter 678. Zhang Zhishuan's 2 disciples were surprised and said angrily, Master, the enemy is here. How can you not come out of the mountain? Zhang Zhishuan shook his head. No, you can't fight in this battle. I advise you not to go. Wei Qing looked at Zhang Zhishuan disappointedly. Shibua, I thought you were a strong cultivator who was not afraid of these bureaucratic nonsense. I didn't expect you to be the same as Shixiang and the others. Zhang Zhishuan sighed and said, Little Shirji, have you ever thought about why I'm hiding in Dingan County at the corner of Tiannan and secretly taking care of my disciples? Wei Qing's heart suddenly trembled when she heard this. She thought to herself, yes, Shibua used to be the chairman of the Taoist Association. Why did he end up living in this remote place? Wei Qing asked tentatively, Shibua, did he offend someone? Or? Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and said, don't mention the past anymore. Besides, I've already sworn that I will never fight with anyone again. Therefore, I can't go to this battle, nor can I speak for you because I can't speak either. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng were greatly disappointed, and their faces were gloomy. Zhang Zhishuan smiled slightly and comforted them, don't think about it anymore. If you don't want to lose, then don't participate in this battle. You can't afford to provoke them, but you can always hide. Moreover, this time the Japanese cultivation world has come prepared. They are coming aggressively, and it's definitely not a good situation. It's very dangerous. As the saying goes, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. When you all become great cultivators, it won't be too late to get back at them. Yu Sheng didn't say anything, but his clenched fists had already betrayed his thoughts. Wei Qing, on the other hand, said in a low voice with an extremely heavy heart, Shibua, we understand. If you have nothing else to say, we'll go first. Zhang Zhishuan sighed softly and said, well, go. In the path of cultivation you can't fight for a short time. Take a long-term view. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng had come excitedly and left dejectedly. Seeing Wei Qing leave, Zhang Zhishuan's short disciple couldn't help turning his head and shouting at Zhang Zhishuan, Master, if you don't want to go, can't you let us go? The taller disciple also said angrily, Yes, Master, we didn't swear that we couldn't go. Zhang Zhishuan snorted. Fine, your legs are on your bodies anyway. Do you think I'd lock you up? His 2 disciples were overjoyed. Master, you agree? Zhang Zhishuan sneered and said, If you go, don't come back and don't call me Master again. The tall Taoist and the short Taoist's faces fell. The tall Taoist shouted, Why? Zhang Zhishuan said with a cold expression, Because I don't want to see you all throw away your lives. I didn't bring you all out to throw away your lives. If anything happens to you all, who will inherit my legacy? His 2 disciples immediately stopped talking. After they looked at each other, they suppressed their anger and said, Master, I understand. After that, they swallowed their anger and left Zhang Zhishuan's room. Zhang Zhishuan watched them leave and sighed heavily. He picked up the brush again and wanted to continue writing the second half of the couplet. But every time he raised the brush and was about to put it down, he felt that the brush in his hand was as heavy as Mount Tai, and his heart was in a mess. After a long time, Zhang Zhishuan, who had been unable to write, suddenly put the brush in his hand down in frustration. The soft tip of the brush suddenly became like the sharp tip of a spear, piercing into the hard mahogany table with a poof, and standing upright on the table like a flagpole. Zhang Zhishuan stared at the brush in front of him, his eyes flickering. After a long time he suddenly turned around and strode in the direction of Haikao City. He walked all the way. Although he was nearly 100 years old, his footsteps were as fast as the wind, and his body was as swift as a galloping horse. In addition, he chose to walk in sparsely populated places, so along the way he was even faster than a speeding car on the highway. When he was about to reach Haikou City, Zhang Zhishuan slowed down and went straight to the National Hotel on Holiday Beach. After arriving at the National Hotel, Zhang Zhishuan hesitated for a moment at the door, then strode into the hotel and went straight to Li Yundong's room. After knocking on the door for a while, Zhang Zhishuan found that the person who opened the door was a tall, beautiful woman with an extraordinary temperament. Zhang Zhishuan was stunned. "Excuse me, does Li Yundong live here?" This woman was none other than Ziyuan, who was responsible for guarding Li Yundong today. When Ziyuan saw Zhang Zhishuan, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She asked tentatively, "Are you Taoist Mi Jingzi?" Zhang Zhishuan laughed. "Do you know me?" Ziyuan quickly bowed respectfully and said with a smile, "Taoist, please come in. I'm Ziyuan of the Linggong sect. Jinren, please come in. I'm sorry I didn't go out to welcome you." Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and walked in with a smile. "You don't have to be so polite, Jinren Ziyuan. Your name is well known to me." As he said this, he looked at Ziyuan seriously and couldn't help nodding and praising her. "Well, you are indeed a famous female cultivator. Not bad, not bad. Even Wang Yuanshan didn't have such a cultivation quotient as you back then. You are really better than him." Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "Taoist, you flatter me. I just got to where I am today by chance. In terms of cultivation quotient, how could I dare to look up to you?" Zhang Zhishuan chuckled. He stroked his beard and said, "Well, don't flatter me. I didn't come here today to listen to your praise." Ziyuan smiled and said, "Jinren Zhang, are you here to see Li Yundong?" Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, "You are so smart. You guessed my intention at once." Ziyuan couldn't help but look at Li Yundong, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor and meditating. After Li Yundong read the Vajra longevity powers that you passed to him, he couldn't restrain his excitement, so he specially asked us to protect him and cultivate here. Zhang Zhishuan looked at Li Yundong strangely, shook his head and sighed. "I have lived for so many years, but this is the first time I have seen someone cultivating in meditation in a hotel. It's really him. However, since the Tao of cultivation has been enlightened, it is indeed necessary to enter meditation immediately. Otherwise, if the time is delayed, it will be twice the effort with half the result." As he said this, he walked to the front of Li Yundong and looked at him fixedly for a while. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and his murderous fingers were like spears and swords, stabbing toward Li Yundong's forehead. This move was as fast as lightning, as fast as thunder, and it happened so suddenly that even Ziyuan was shocked. She immediately reached out subconsciously to grab Zhang Zhishuan's wrist. She knew that if Zhang Zhishuan's finger went down, he could even poke a hole in a rock, let alone a person's forehead. However, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Zhishuan's swift and violent finger rushed to Li Yundong's forehead and stopped 2 centimeters away. At this time, Ziyuan's hand also suddenly froze in midair, 2 inches away from Zhang Zhishuan's hand. Zhang Zhishuan saw that Li Yundong seemed to be unaware of his finger, and his face was still calm and without any reaction. He nodded slightly and said, "Not bad, not thinking, not doing, not forgetting about things and me. This is the real realm of the unity of heaven and man, the realm of spiritual travel." Only then did Ziyuan feel relieved. Her heart, which had jumped into her throat, fell back into her chest. She knew that Zhang Zhishuan had just been purely testing Li Yundong's realm and the depth of his meditation at this time. With Li Yundong's current cultivation realm, even if he was in meditation, if someone wanted to sneak attack him from the outside world, he would immediately subconsciously defend himself. This kind of defense was the instinctive reaction of a great cultivator at the Jinshin level, Niden and primordial spirit. If Li Yundong was not deep in meditation at this time and had not entered the realm of forgetting about things and being one with heaven and man, he would immediately wake up and fight back after being poked by Zhang Zhishuan's finger. But once a great cultivator entered the realm of yang spirit leaving the body, spiritual travel, even if ordinary people chopped off their heads with a knife, they would not wake up. It could be said that at this time, great cultivators would have no strength to truss a chicken, and ordinary children could stab them to death with a knife. This was also the reason why Li Yundong wanted to find someone to protect him. Ziyuan asked tentatively, "Taoist Mi Jingzi, do you know when Li Yundong will wake up?" Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, "I'm not an immortal. How would I know? I came here this time because if Jinren Li hasn't left yet, I want to compare notes with him on cultivation. But I didn't expect him to be so eager that he would enter meditation and cultivate here. I really admire him." Ziyuan smiled and said, Isn't that because the classics you wrote are so exquisite that he can't help himself? Zhang Zhishuan smiled and said, I didn't write all of them. They were all passed on to me by my master. I just sorted them out. As he said this, he glanced at the Vajra longevity skill that was spread out beside Ziyuan and suddenly asked, Did you also read this? Ziyuan said with some fear, Yes, if you think it's inappropriate then I. Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and suddenly asked, What is Vajra skill? Ziyuan was stunned, but she quickly realized that Zhang Zhishuan was testing her. She immediately replied, Vajra skill is a kind of external skill that trains the body and the internal organs. The trick is to use the rigid internal strength chi in the body to dredge the meridians of the whole body, so that the body can be as strong as Vajra. Zhang Zhishuan didn't comment and asked again, What is longevity skill? Just as Ziyuan was about to speak, she suddenly heard a knock on the door. Su Chan's clear voice came from outside the door. Sister Ziyuan, we're back. After that, she and Zhou Qin pushed the door open and entered, followed by Lu Feier, who was talking and laughing with her. Chao Kefi was behind Lu Feier. Ziyuan glanced at them. Just as she was about to stand up and introduce them to Zhang Zhishuan suddenly shouted, The Great Way is in front of you. Why are you distracted? Ziyuan suddenly shivered and no longer looked at Su Chan, Zhou Qin and the others. She respectfully replied to Zhang Zhishuan, Longevity skill is an internal skill that trains the mind and cultivates the innate chi of people. Its trick is to focus on relaxation and nature, concentrate on using many soft curved movements, communicate the innate chi of heaven and earth, and blend it with the primordial chi of the internal organs of the human body, so that people can enter the gate of Shen Pin, refine the essence into chi, refine the chi into the spirit, and return the 5 chi to the origin. Finally, it can reach the Wuji realm of refining the spirit to return to the void, returning to Wuji, forgetting everything and becoming one with nature. Zhang Zhishuan nodded. Then tell me which is more important, Vajra skill or longevity skill. At this time, Zhou Qin and Su Chan, who had just entered the door, also realized that the old man in a white shirt, a black hat and a half-foot-long white beard in front of them must be Zhang Zhishuan, the author of Vajra longevity skill. Zhou Qin immediately turned around and made a silent gesture to Lu Feier and Chao Kefi. She said in a low voice, Jinren Zhang is passing on his skills. Let's not disturb them. Let's leave. Su Chan looked at Zhang Zhishuan curiously and said in a low voice, But Jinren Zhang doesn't seem to want to drive us away. Sister Zhou Qin, why don't we listen from the side? Zhou Qin also wanted to listen to Zhang Zhishuan's teachings. After all, this kind of opportunity was not something that ordinary people could encounter. She glanced at Su Chan and said tentatively in a low voice, Then, just listen to a few words? Su Chan also smiled slyly and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Yes, just a few words. Like thieves, the two of them entered the room quietly. As soon as they sat down, they turned their heads and saw Lu Feier and Chao Kefi standing at the door in a daze, at a loss for what to do. Zhou Qin quickly made a gesture to them to close the door, indicating for them to go out and close the door. However, because of her relationship with Li Yundong, Lu Feier had long been full of curiosity and admiration for him. Therefore, when she saw a Taoist priest preaching in the room, her curiosity and gossiping soul suddenly burned. After closing the door behind her, she pulled Chao Kefi into the room quietly. Chapter 679. Lu Feier and Chao Kefi's actions made Zhou Qin and Su Chan look at each other, for fear that Zhang Zhishuan would lose his temper and stop teaching them. But to their surprise, Zhang Zhishuan didn't seem to notice their existence. He still asked and answered Ziyuan as if there was no one else around. Only then did Zhou Qin and Su Chan feel relieved. They quietly listened to Zhang Zhishuan's teaching. The two of them were already masters of cultivation. Although they had reached the primary level of the Jinshin, their cultivation of magic was still far from that of great cultivators. Especially in terms of understanding of the great way of cultivation, the two of them were far inferior to Ziyuan and Li Yunyang. Therefore, when a supreme master like Zhang Zhishuan was preaching here, the two of them eagerly absorbed the meaning of every word Zhang Zhishuan said. However, the two of them had a certain cultivation foundation, so they listened with relish. From time to time, they would suddenly realize something. However, Lu Feier, who had no cultivation foundation, was confused. She had no idea what the old Taoist and Ziyuan were talking about. She could understand every word they said, but when they were put together, she didn't understand anything at all. Lu Feier's interest waned and she looked around resentfully. However, she saw at a glance that Chao Kefi was listening very attentively. Her eyes flashed as if she had understood something. She couldn't help but pull Chow Kefi's sleeve strangely and whisper, "Sister Chow, do you understand?" However, Chow Kefi didn't seem to hear anything. She still listened attentively to Zhang Zhishuan's teaching. Seeing that she was ignoring her, Lu Feier was very disappointed. She grabbed Chow Kefi's arm and whispered, Sister Chow, Sister Chow." At this time, Chow Kefi suddenly turned her head, and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. In an instant, her black pupils seemed to be stained with blood, turning bright red and ferocious. She glared at her fiercely and said, "Shut up." Lu Feier was shocked, but when she calmed down and looked at Chow Kefi again, she found that the color of her eyes had only changed for a moment. In the blink of an eye they had turned back to black. Lu Feier was frightened by Chow Kefi's words. Her heart was pounding and she sat where she was. She didn't dare to speak again, but her mind was in a mess. "Sister Chow, what happened just now? Is this my illusion?" Seeing that Lu Feier was silent, Chow Kefi turned her head back and listened attentively to Zhang Zhishuan's preaching, as if she had never shown any abnormality just now. Almost there, Zhang Zhishuan didn't seem to be aware of what was going on here. He continued to ask and answer questions quickly with Ziyuan. When he felt that Ziyuan's answers were wrong, he would correct her. After more than an hour of talking and answering, Zhang Zhishuan stood up and patted the corner of his clothes, as if to brush away the dust on his body. He said freely, "Jinren Ziyuan is indeed worthy of being Wang Yuanshan's disciple. Your cultivation foundation is extremely solid. Compared with you, my two disciples are like naive children. I'm ashamed." Ziyuan quickly stood up, bowed respectfully and said, "Taoist priest, you flatter me." Zhang Zhishuan smiled slightly and waved his hand. Only then did he look at Zhou Qin and Su Chan and finally at Chow Kefi. He gave her a meaningful look, then withdrew his gaze and said, "Well, it's really lively here today. I'll go first." After that he walked slowly toward the door. Ziyuan hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Taoist priest, let me see you off." The two of them walked out of the hotel. When they reached the side of the road, Ziyuan asked doubtfully, "Taoist priest Mi Jingzi, I saw you looking at President Chow with a special meaning in your eyes just now. Could it be?" Zhang Zhishuan smiled and looked at Ziyuan with appreciation. Not only is she smart, but she's also very careful. Amazing, amazing. I really envy Wang Yuanshan. You must be very curious as to why I would preach in front of her, right? Ziyuan nodded. Could it be that Taoist priest is testing something? Zhang Zhishuan said, yes, but also not. However, in addition to her, isn't there a little fox next to you? Hey, sometimes the great way of cultivation doesn't have to be spread through ordinary people. Otherwise, why did Zen Master Baizhang enlighten the rock fox back then? Ziyuan hesitated and said, however, it is precisely because Zen Master Baizhang enlightened the rock fox that the Fox Zen school appeared. It is also because of the Fox Zen school that the mystical silver fox appeared. It is precisely because of the mystical silver fox that there has been a 60-year period of chaos and the current conflict in the cultivation world. Zhang Zhishuan laughed and said, we Taoist cultivators pay attention to our own fate. This means that Taoist cultivators can control their own life, aging, illness, and death through cultivation, instead of being controlled by God. However, there is nothing we can do about such a coincidental change of fate. Even if there is no Zen Master Baizhang to enlighten the rock fox, there will be Zen Master Qianzhang and Zen Master Wanzhang. It is destined that the Fox Zen school will appear. It is destined that the rock fox will be enlightened. It is destined that the mystical silver fox will create chaos. This is not something you and I can change. As he spoke, Zhang Zhishuan pondered for a while and said, as for your friend who calls herself President Chow, although I can see that she is a demon, not all demons are bad. Therefore, I can't control whether she will be good or bad in the future, and I don't want to control it. Ziyuan asked, but what if one day she turns against us and becomes our enemy? What should we do? Taoist priest, aren't you helping the wicked? Zhang Zhishuan laughed and said, didn't I teach the three of you? It can't be that the three of you are no match for her, can it? Ziyuan seemed to have understood something and asked tentatively, Taoist priest, could it be that you have already found out about her? However, Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and interrupted her, saying, no, I came here this time to help my little friend in cultivation, but I didn't expect that he had already spread his wings and soared above the ninth heaven. I can't help him even if I want to. But since you are here, I might as well compete with you. We can exchange cultivation experiences with each other, which can be regarded as my contribution to the cultivation world. As he said this, he said with emotion, I came out of the mountain in 1993, and my greatest emotion was the difficulty and hardships of spreading the way of cultivation. When you reach my age, you will understand that the three most important things in the world are preaching, teaching, and dispelling doubts. Other things are just fleeting clouds not worth worrying about. After that, he smiled and nodded to Ziyuan. Well, that's it. I'll go first. You can go back. Ziyuan watched Zhang Zhishuan float away and sighed inwardly. Taoist priest is extremely broad-minded. It's really hard for ordinary people to understand. When she returned to the room, she saw Zhou Qin and Su Chan sitting by the bed in a daze. Their eyes were dull, and they looked as if they were in a trance. Obviously, they were absorbed in Zhang Zhishuan's words. As for Lu Feier, she was sitting alone, looking puzzled and worried. Ziyuan asked curiously, Lu Feier, where is President Chao? Lu Feier said with a sullen face, she left me and went back by herself. As she said this, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Ziyuan hesitantly, as if she wanted to say something. Seeing her like this, Ziyuan immediately smiled and said, What's wrong? What do you want to say? Lu Feier said hesitantly, Ziyuan, I always feel that there seems to be something wrong with Sister Chao recently. She sometimes gives me a strange feeling as if she is another person. Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat, but she acted as if nothing had happened. She still smiled lightly and said, Oh? What do you mean? Lu Feier sat up straight and said, Last time, I saw her not sleeping in the middle of the night. She was playing magic by the window alone as if she could also cultivate magic. Just now, when she was listening to this Taoist priest preaching, she was also very serious. I talked to her, but she was still fierce to me. She looked so scary. Ziyuan laughed and said, President Chao has been in poor health since she was a child. It's understandable that she is dedicated to the Tao. Maybe you are thinking too much. Lu Feier stared at Ziyuan for a long time. Seeing that she didn't seem to be perfunctory, she stood up and said with flagging interest, Maybe. I'll go back first. See you tomorrow. After watching Lu Feier go out the door, she turned around and happened to see Zhou Qin and Su Chan looking at her. Obviously, the two of them had heard the conversation between her and Lu Feier and had woken up with a start. Zhou Qin said with a serious face, Has the mystical silver fox begun to awaken? Ziyuan hesitated for a moment and said, If I'm not wrong, it should be the instinct of the mystical silver fox that is awakening. After being sealed for more than 1,000 years, the soul of the mystical silver fox is not complete. Her divine sense and memories are scattered. She has even forgotten all the magic she has cultivated. Only the purest power of Yuanyin remains in her body. Therefore, it is equivalent to her cultivating again. Every time someone mentions the way of cultivation, it will arouse her memory about cultivation and restore her cultivation. Zhou Qin was shocked. So you mean, her power is still there but she has forgotten how to use it? Ziyuan nodded. That's about it. Su Chan, who had been silent all this time, looked at Li Jiandong worriedly. Yundong, wake up quickly. If you don't wake up, the mystical silver fox will wake up. Zhou Qin also said with a wry smile, Master, where is your yang spirit now? Can you hear us? If you can hear us, come back quickly. Things are getting more and more serious. While she was speaking, she heard a knock at the door. Zhou Qin was stunned. She turned her head and shouted, Come in, the door is not locked. Soon the door was pushed open. It was Ruan Hongling who poked her head in. After a tentative look, she immediately pushed the door open and rushed in like the wind. She rushed to Ziyuan's side, hugged her and said loudly, Shiji Ziyuan, something's wrong. Ziyuan, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin suddenly became nervous and asked in unison, What happened? Ruan Hongling quickly took out a golden invitation card from her pocket and said, Shiji, look. Ziyuan took it and frowned slightly. She raised her head unhappily and said to Ruan Hongling, Is this also a matter? Didn't you know about this a long time ago? It's reasonable to send a golden invitation now. Is it worth it for you to rush here and make a fuss? Ruan Hongling shook her head like a rattled drum. Soon she took out another golden invitation and said, Shiji, look again. Ziyuan was stunned. Another one? Where is this from? But she soon saw that the inscription and content on it were almost the same. The only difference was that the date had changed. Ziyuan said in surprise, The Jingyi school has brought forward the inauguration ceremony of the leader? What? Ruan Hongling grabbed Ziyuan's arm tightly with both hands and said, Yes, it's in 2 days. What should we do, Shiji? Su Chan and Zhou Qin both looked at the golden invitation nervously. They were caught off guard and cried out involuntarily, What? Damn it, the Jingyi school is so hateful. How can this kind of thing be brought forward so easily? I'm going back to Shanghai today to visit my sick mother-in-law. I'd like to ask for leave from everyone and update one chapter in advance. In addition, if I don't update the second chapter before 10 o'clock in the evening, I won't be able to update today. I'd like to apologize to everyone first. I hope you can understand. Just take it that I'm asking for leave today. Chapter 680. The sudden change of the Jingyi school shocked Su Chan and the others. Ruan Hongling said to them anxiously, I don't know, but I saw on the TV news that a delegation from the Japanese cultivation world has come to our country. I think it might have something to do with this. Zhou Qin's eyes lit up. She clenched one hand into a fist and pounded the palm of her other hand. That makes sense. This time, the Japanese cultivation world has come to our country with great fanfare. They must have been highly valued by the upper echelons. Judging from the conduct of these officials, they must want to keep the peace and avoid causing any trouble, so they will definitely restrain our cultivation sects. The Jingyi school has always been the most powerful sect in the cultivation world. If there is a conflict in the cultivation world, they will definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Moreover, the people of the Jingyi school must be afraid that when they hold the inauguration ceremony, they will come to attack us. At that time, they won't know where to hide even if they want to. Ruan Hongling blurted out, Yes, Zhou Qin, you are so smart. Why didn't I think of this? After all, Zhou Qin was born in the officialdom. In the blink of an eye, she had seen through their tricks. She chuckled and said, Good method, good method. Not only can they catch us off guard, but they can also catch the Japanese cultivation world off guard. They can also avoid the sharp edge and force the Japanese cultivation world to make a choice at this time. Either you come with the group of people now or you leave. Anyway, we won't wait for your people to be ready before we meet you. When your people are ready, we will leave. Aha, it's amazing, it's a good plan. I just don't know who came up with this idea. Ruan Hongling said angrily, You're still praising them? The question now is, what should we do? Su Chan said in a weak voice, Yes, Yundong is still in a trance. What if he doesn't wake up at that time? As soon as she said this, the room suddenly fell silent. Ziyuan held the 2 golden invitations in her hand and looked at them over and over with sparkling eyes. After a long time she said slowly in a low voice, Hongling, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, I think. I'm afraid we have to be prepared that Li Yundong won't be able to arrive in time. Everyone's heart sank and they couldn't help but look at Li Yundong. From the day Su Chan met Li Yundong, she had been living under his wings. Although at the beginning he was still very young, and his wings couldn't withstand much wind and rain. But now he was already a man of indomitable spirit. Suddenly losing his protection, Su Chan suddenly felt empty in her heart, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. Almost there Su Chan was like this, so were Zhou Qin and Ziyuan. When she had gone down the mountain, she had never thought that she would have to rely on this descendant of Jindan to help her in the future. However, after getting along with him for so many days, he had always turned the tide in desperate situations and turned the rotten into the magical and the impossible. Even Ziyuan didn't know when she had started to secretly agree that this boy had grown into a towering tree. At first he had lived under her shade, but now she was living under his wings. If he didn't wake up, could she successfully take over as the leader of the Linggong sect? Although Ruan Hongling had always liked to bicker with Li Yundong and have some small conflicts with him, when she heard the news that Li Yundong might not be able to make it in time, she really felt that the sky was going to collapse. Although Shiji was powerful, it was difficult for her to fight against so many people. When the time came for the inauguration ceremony of the leader and the Jingyi school was suddenly in trouble, how could they resist at that time? Ruan Hongling was burning with anxiety for a moment. She grabbed Ziyuan's arm and said, Shiji, wait. However, Ziyuan didn't wait for her to finish and interrupted her. Her expression was surprisingly serious. Hongling, stop talking. When I didn't go down the mountain, why weren't you worried at that time? Why are you so worried now? Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, said seriously, Ziyuan, don't worry. Master is not here, but we are. Su Chan also nodded vigorously and said, Yes, Sister Ziyuan. Don't worry, we will definitely support you. However, Ziyuan shook her head and said, Times have changed. If Li Yundong can make it in time, then your support will be very helpful. But now that Li Yundong is not here, if you force yourself to stand up, it will definitely be a terrible disaster. It's absolutely impossible. As she said this, she turned her face and said to Zhou Qin and Su Chan with a cold face, You can't go to the inauguration ceremony of the leader of the Linggong sect. Su Chan exclaimed, Why? Sister Ziyuan, why won't you let us go? Zhou Qin looked angry. Ziyuan, don't you believe us? Ruan Hongling also stared at Ziyuan with her eyes wide open, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Shiji, are you crazy? We're weak in the first place. However, Ziyuan shouted in a rare stern voice, it's because we are weaker than before that you can't go. Moreover, this is a matter of our Lingong sect. We can't involve you. Ruan Hongling couldn't stop tears from rolling in her eyes. Shiji Yuke. Without waiting for her to finish speaking, Ziyuan said firmly, I am the 45th generation of the Lingong sect, the future leader of the Lingong sect, and your eldest Shiji, so you must listen to me. Now, come back to Mount Longhu with me. We can't drag others into the affairs of our Lingong sect. Puff out your chest and stop crying. Don't embarrass your master. After that, she turned her head and stared at Su Chan and Zhou Qin with sharp eyes. You two stay here to protect Li Yundong. Hongling and I will go back to the mountain. If Li Yundong wakes up before the ceremony, you will come with him. If he doesn't, don't come again. Su Chan looked anxious. She wanted to speak again, but Zhou Qin grabbed her and motioned for her to stop. Zhou Qin said in a deep voice, Ziyuan, don't you know that if you make such a decision, the Lingong sect is likely to be destroyed in your hands? A hint of sadness flashed across Ziyuan's eyes, but she soon returned to her calm and elegant fairy appearance. She said lightly, even the sun and the moon will perish, let alone our Lingong sect. If this is the will of heaven, then let this sect, which has been passed down for nearly 1,000 years, perish in my hands. At least, it will not perish in the hands of others. After that, she turned around and walked out of the door resolutely. Ruan Hongling wiped away her tears and said in a choked voice, Shiji, wait for me. I'll go with you. Su Chan subconsciously took a step forward, but she heard Zhou Qin behind her shout in a low voice, Su Chan, don't let Ziyuan's kindness down. If we go, as Ziyuan said, not only will we not be able to help, but we will also likely implicate Ziyuan. You will be there soon. Su Chan was so anxious that she stamped her feet. Then what should we do now? Zhou Qin let out a long sigh. She let go of her hand, sat down cross-legged, and looked at Li Yundong fixedly. Now we can only pray that Master will wake up soon. Thinking of this, Su Chan immediately sat down cross-legged and put her palms together. She said to Zhou Qin, Sister Zhou Qin, why don't you recite Buddhist scriptures with me? Last time Yundong refined the burning thumb pot and was trapped in the spirit space, I kept reciting the scriptures. Later it came true and Sister Ziyuan and you came back. Now you can also recite it with me. As she spoke, she began to recite the scriptures in a low voice. However, Zhou Qin smiled bitterly and said, Last time, Ziyuan helped bring Master back from the spirit space. Who can bring Master back this time? Su Chan stopped reciting the scriptures and said seriously, You can't say that. Yundong is now traveling with his yang spirit. Although he is in the realm of forgetting everything, his situation is different from when he was trapped in the spirit space before. Yundong's yang spirit exists in our spirit space. Maybe he will pass by us at any time. If we keep reciting the scriptures, maybe he will hear us? Zhou Qin thought for a moment and sighed. Well, what you said makes sense. Then she also began to recite the scriptures with Su Chan. However, when Su Chan was reciting the scriptures, her eyes were closed, while Zhou Qin was reciting the scriptures without closing her eyes. She stared at Li Yundong for fear that he would wake up in the next second. Zhou Qin sighed in her heart. Master, if your yang spirit exists in this spirit space, then where are you? If you can hear us, then come back quickly. Where is Li Yundong's yang spirit? I'm afraid that Li Yundong himself can't answer this question. Ever since he had entered the realm of forgetting everything, Li Yundong clearly felt that he was in an absolute empty world. There was no trace around him and it was dark. He couldn't see his fingers in front of him. He was floating in the air with nowhere to borrow strength, like a newborn baby in the chaos. This was not the first time Li Yundong had encountered such a situation, but what was different from before was that this time, Li Yundong clearly felt that his strength was much greater than before. Moreover, as soon as he moved a little, the world around him shook violently, as if an eggshell was troubling him. As soon as he stretched out his hands, the eggshell would break. Li Yundong only struggled a little, and the chaotic and dark world shone brightly. With a crack appeared above his head, as if another world had opened its door to him, and brilliant light fell from the sky. This light fell on the top of Li Yundong's head, and in an instant his whole body felt warm. Li Yundong looked at the brilliant world above his head and knew that this must be another realm waiting for him. He struggled with all his might and jumped out of this primitive chaotic world. This jump was like a baby being born or a monkey jumping on a rock. Li Yundong suddenly jumped into this bright world. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in the land of the boundless world. Above his head was a majestic blue sky with pure white clouds. The sun seemed to have a pair of dark eyes looking at him. Below his feet was a vast land, a steel city, endless streams of horses and carriages, and countless mortals wriggling under his feet like a colony of ants. At this moment, Li Yundong suddenly understood. In an instant he understood what the Taoist Taishu Wuji was and what the Buddhist Eight Great Freedom Heavens was. And at this moment, no one in the world knew that the moment Li Yundong was about to enter the indestructible Jinshin, he was the first to understand the mystery of Buddhism and Taoism. Since the end of the Ming dynasty and the beginning of the Qing dynasty, since the two great masters of the Wu Lu sect, Wu Shouyang and Lu Huayang, who were famous for their combination of immortals and Buddhism and Taoism, great cultivators who had comprehended Buddhism and Taoism to the realm of indestructible Jinshin in the past 300 years had come to the world again. Well, sorry, there are a lot of things to do and it's late. I don't think I can catch up with the second update today. I owe you 2 updates and I'll make it up in the future. In addition, I encountered a very interesting thing when I returned to Shanghai. Yesterday when I was waiting for the train at the railway station, I suddenly saw a middle-aged Taoist priest in a white shirt, with bandages on his feet, a black hat, and a horsetail whisk in his hand. At that time I secretly took a photo and posted it on Weibo. This is not an interesting thing, but this Taoist priest was drinking coke at that time, and next to him was a coquettish mature woman who was dressed in revealing clothes and had a tattoo on her back. Alas, I was shocked at that time. I really can't afford to hurt such a Taoist priest and a cultivator. Chapter 681. Bastard. In the Shangri-La Hotel in Dongwu City, Sanjit Tsunekatsu angrily threw the mobile phone in his hand to the ground. The newly launched Apple IV was smashed into countless pieces by him without mercy. In his room, Kaisai Hikaryuni opened his eyes slightly and said faintly, "Tsunekatsu, what did Buddha teach you? You have to be calm." Sanjit Tsunekatsu said angrily, "Great monk, how can I be calm and normal? These cunning Chinese actually used such a despicable and shameless method to deal with us. They are all a bunch of cowards, a bunch of rats." At this time, the door of his and the great monk's room was also pushed open. It was Ayase Xingguang of the Ayase Shinto, dressed in a Japanese-style men's kimono, with his hands in his sleeves, walking in slowly. Behind him was still the Ksitigarbha goddess Ayase Chuyun, and behind her were many cultivators from other sects in Japan. Ayase Xingguang glanced at the broken mobile phone parts and couldn't help laughing. "Ah, it seems that you have already gotten the news, Tsunekatsu." Sanjit Tsunekatsu was furious, but he did not dare to neglect this middle-aged man who looked a little lazy. He turned around, put his palms together and said, "Si Xingguang, have you all received the news too?" At this time, cultivators from other sects in Japan poured in, filling the originally spacious and luxurious business room. Si Xingguang leaned against the windowsill, touched his chin and said with a smile, "Yes, otherwise why would we all come here? To see your heroic posture of smashing your mobile phone?" Hearing his words, some cultivators from other sects who could not bear to see Sanjit Tsunekatsu laughed in a low voice. Sanjit Tsunekatsu's face turned red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Are you all here to laugh at me?" Si Xingguang waved his hand and said, No, Tsunekatsu, don't get excited. Aren't you our vanguard? Now the situation has changed. Jingyi School has changed the date. After discussing our opinions, we want to hear your opinion. Now should we go or stay? Or should we fight? When Kaisai Hikagi heard this, he immediately opened his eyes and looked at Imagawa Kagumo, who was in the crowd. Imagawa Kagumo nodded slightly at him. Kaisai Hikari calmed down, closed his eyes, and softly chanted the name of Buddha. Sanjit Tsunekatsu also quickly glanced at Kaisai Hikaryuni, only to see him slightly nod his head with an undetectable movement. He immediately made up his mind and said loudly, "There is no reason to look back when the arrow is out of the bow. Although we are the vanguard group, since we are here, we should not be afraid to fight like those cowardly Chinas. Although we are fewer in number, we should face the difficulties head-on and defeat the China's cultivators with courage and determination." Sanjit Tsunekatsu's words were full of vigor. Many cultivators around him nodded secretly. Some even responded loudly, "Tsunekatsu, well said. Tsunekatsu, please continue to lead us." "You're right. So what if we have fewer people? Since the Chinese changed the date at the last minute, it means that they're already afraid of us. In a battle between two armies, morale came first. If they admit defeat like this, do we still have to be afraid of them? As soon as these people spoke, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became hot. Si Xinguang curled his lips and murmured in a low voice, "What a headache. I knew it would be like this." When Sionji Tsunekatsu saw this, he walked up to him, put his palms together and bowed. "Xinguang, although I am a nobody and my words have no weight, please, for the sake of our Japanese cultivation world, please work hard to move forward with us, please." Si Xinguang stared at Sionji Tsunekatsu for a long time. He turned his head to look at Aichiyun beside him and sighed silently. He laughed and said, "You're too serious, Tsunekatsu. Our ISE Shinto is also a part of the Japanese cultivation world. Naturally, we will not be willing to fall behind others. Since we are here, we will definitely fight with all our strength and strive to win." Sionji Tsunekatsu was overjoyed when he heard this. For a moment, the Japanese cultivators in the room were also excited and shouting slogans. And at this moment, the room they were in suddenly trembled. The teacups in the room made clanking sounds, and the tea in the cups trembled to the point of ripples. Earthquake? Some cultivators were shocked. Sionji Tsunekatsu frowned and said, "No way? Dongwu City should not be in the earthquake zone." Chuyun, who had a calm temperament, suddenly said, "It's not an earthquake. It's a cultivator who causes heaven and earth to tremble when he is comprehending the Tao." Everyone was shocked. Where could a cultivator be so powerful? How could he cause heaven and earth to tremble? This tremor came and went quickly. Soon, the room calmed down, and all the cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world suddenly felt a shadow in their hearts. Where on earth is this cultivator comprehending the Tao? It seems that this time their wishful thinking may not be completely realized. In the past, Li Yundong had never understood why cultivators could challenge the power of heaven and thunder. When he had faced the heavenly tribulation, Li Yundong had realized the horror of heavenly thunder for the first time. It was a kind of power that could destroy heaven and earth. Yusun. Especially after a cultivator's cultivation reached the sixth heaven of Yuanying, the Yin spirit would appear in the Naiden, and then the Yang spirit would be cultivated. When the Yang spirit was cultivated to the highest level, it would really jump out of the cage and no longer be in the five elements. From then on, it would say goodbye to life, old age, illness, and death. Although the body might age, the cultivator's Yang spirit would become stronger and stronger, especially after cultivating to the Jinshin phase. With the condensation of the Jinshin, the cultivator's Yang spirit could almost be said to be immortal. Even if this body was destroyed, the cultivator could find a new body with his Yang spirit and the memory of his previous life, or be reincarnated. This cycle would continue until the end of the world. For cultivators who had cultivated to this level, it was difficult for any magic treasures in the world to kill them. Only the magic circle could break them, and only heavenly thunder could kill them. When encountering heavenly thunder, cultivators couldn't even avoid it. Why would they go there knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain? The jinchi of cultivators came from essence, qi and blood, and people ate the five elements of heaven and earth and turned them into essence, qi and blood through the five internal organs. Therefore, the jinchi of cultivators actually came from the five internal organs of the human body and the five elements of heaven and earth, and heavenly thunder was the supreme power above the five elements. When the heavenly thunder from the ninth heaven struck down, the five elements in the body would be broken and the order of the small universe would collapse. It was absolutely an extravagant hope to resist a second time with qi. But it could only block one heavenly thunder and the second one would be destroyed. What was the point? What was the point of cultivators going through this heavenly tribulation? How could they absorb power from the heavenly tribulation to strengthen themselves? But at this moment, Li Yundong suddenly understood why it was said that cultivators could challenge heavenly thunder after cultivating to the indestructible Jinshin, and why they dared to say that heaven and earth can be destroyed, but I am the only one who is indestructible when cultivating to this level. At this moment, Li Yundong felt that the strength of his whole body seemed to be drawn by heaven and earth, wanting to spread out in all directions and turn into countless clones. At this time, Li Yundong suddenly remembered the realm of 8 free heavens he had comprehended in the spirit space of the burning thumb pot. Why could Buddhism and Taoism be practiced together? The origin was that whether it was Buddhism or Taoism, it was a process of searching for oneself and one's true self. The great cultivators of Taoism had been called Jinren throughout the dynasties, and the great cultivators were called Great Jinren by those in power. Then Zhen referred to the true self of seeking the true self, getting rid of the false and retaining the true. There was no immortal body in the world, only an eternal Dharmakaya. And what was unique was that the cultivators of Buddhism also cultivated the true self. The Diamond Sutra said, "There is no self, no human, no living beings, no longevity but the Dharmakaya." It meant that there was no self in the physical body, no self in others, no self in heaven and earth, and even no self in life and death. Everything in this world is fake. My body, the people around me, the world around me, and even my life and death are all fake and nothingness. Only my true method is eternal and unique. This coincided with the realm of unity of heaven and man, infinite void, advocated by Taoism. Li Yundong had read the cultivation books of the Wuxia sect in the spirit space. He clearly remembered what Lu Huayang had written in the Life's Wisdom Sutra, shattering the void map. A brilliant world surrounded the world, the void was clear, and the heart of heaven shone. The sea was clear and the moon melted in the pool. At that time, Li Yundong didn't understand the meaning of this poem, but at this time he suddenly realized that cultivators needed to enter the realm of forgetting themselves, so that they could enter the void, which was the chaotic dark world where Li Yundong had been before. In theory, there was no difference between the birth of a cultivator and the birth of an ordinary person. A mortal was born from the mother's womb. To a baby, it was originally a chaotic and dark world. When a mortal kept struggling, it was the time for him to be born. When cultivators had the power to break through this world, they had the opportunity and ability to go to another world. After shattering the void, the realm of forgetting oneself made Li Yundong feel that his body was in the boundless world, and his yang spirit was everywhere, as if it existed in every corner of the world and in every great way. This kind of feeling and this kind of realm were very mysterious, so Lu Huayang wrote a poem to describe this realm. Not born and not destroyed, the clouds are scattered, the mountains are clean. There is no going and no coming, wisdom returns to meditation, the moon is lonely. For Buddhists, what was the great freedom? What was the true self? In the spirit space, Li Yundong clearly understood that the eighth great freedom was the great freedom, which was the true self. The ultimate goal of Taoist cultivation was to cultivate one's yang spirit to the point where it could be big or small, near or far, light or heavy, more or less, still or active, infinitely changeable and immortal. These were the 8 realms of freedom. Why could cultivators resist the heavenly thunder? It was precisely because when the heavenly thunder struck, the yang spirit of cultivators could instantly reach the realm of the 8 great freedom realm, big and small, more and less, gather and disperse. I see. Li Yundong laughed and said, when the heavenly thunder falls, the cultivator's yang spirit will instantly transform into billions of clones. The heavenly thunder can split 1, but it can't split 2. It can split 2, but it can't split 3. Even the final 81 bolts of the strongest heavenly thunder can't strike every place in the world. When cultivating the immortal true self and comprehending the great way, cultivators will cast the brand of true self and true method in the world. In the future, even if all the yang spirit clones are split apart, they can slowly gather together according to the seed of true self and true method left by the cultivator in the world and use it as a coordinate to recreate the yang spirit Dharmakaya. What was immortality? The heavenly thunder could not kill, and the divine thunder could not disperse. This was called immortality. What was the immortal Jinshin? Although the Jinshin was broken, the true method still existed. This was the immortal Jinshin. When Li Yundong comprehended this truth, his yang spirit doppelganger had already spread to an infinite realm. Each of his doppelgangers was as small as powder. At this time he couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. His laughter made heaven and earth tremble, but there was no sound in the secular world. No one heard his laughter. This was the invisible great way, and the loudest sound was silent. But after Li Yundong finished laughing, his heart suddenly moved. He thought to himself, where should I put the brand of the true method and the true self? Should I put them in the sky and shine with the sun and the moon? Or should I put them under the earth and live as long as heaven and earth? Just as Li Yundong was hesitating, he suddenly thought of a beautiful smiling face. A gentle and moving face flashed in front of him, and her voice and smile seemed to be right in front of him. Li Yundong immediately smiled gently and said, yes, of course, it's best to store this brand in Su Chan's body. If she is here, I will be here. If she is not here, then what's the point of living alone in this world? Moreover, Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin are still waiting for me. I'd better go back early. Thinking of this, Li Yundong's mind stirred, and the clones that had spread out began to gather quickly. However, it was easy for him to disperse, but it was very difficult for him to gather back. When Li Yundong slowly gathered his clones, it was already 1,000 years in the human world. Li Yundong felt that he had only been in meditation for a moment, but when he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find that there was no one in the room. Su Chan, Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan, who were supposed to protect him, were all gone. Only the Liuhe and Bahuang sword, which he had given to Zhou Qin for safekeeping, were quietly guarding him. Looking at the empty room, Li Yundong's heart sank, and an ominous thought arose spontaneously, I'll try to update 2 more chapters in the evening. Chapter 682. Oh master, hurry up, hurry up. We're not going to make it. On a side peak of Mount Longhu. Yusun, unlike in the past, Zhang Lufang had specially put on the special Taoist robe of the Jingyi school of Mount Longhu. At this time she was wearing a black robe, with a black and white yin-yang pattern embroidered on the chest. She wore a low black Taoist crown with vertical patterns on her head, a horsetail whisk more than 2 feet long in her other hand, and a pair of light blue cloth shoes with 1,000 layers of soles on her feet. Although the black Taoist robe covered her from head to toe like a straight tube, and no curves could be seen all over her body, making her look too solemn and even a little lethargic, Zhang Liufang's pretty face was smiling, and her beautiful eyes were sparkling, which made people couldn't help but praise her in their hearts. What a beautiful little Taoist nun. Zhang Lufang urged loudly at the front door. Soon, a tall foreigner with blonde hair, blue eyes rushed out of the wing room in the backyard of the Taoist temple. This foreigner was none other than Hardadef, who had been rescued by Zhang Lufang and Zhang Kongyun. Hardadef was wearing a dark blue Taoist robe, and the Taoist crown on his head was crooked. He seemed to be very unused to the cloth shoes on his feet. He walked a little crookedly and his posture was ridiculous. But even so, he still grabbed the sleeve of an old Taoist priest with one hand and kept shouting, "Master, eldest Shiji is calling you to hurry up. You have to hurry up." Zhang Kongyun was wearing a golden Taoist robe with blue edges. He hadn't even put on his robe yet and his clothes were disheveled. As he was dragged away by Hardadef, he bulged his eyes and shouted, "B*****, how can you treat your master like this? Let go of me, let go of me. It's inappropriate for others to see us like this. If you don't let go, I'll kick you out of the door." As soon as Hardadef heard the words, "kick him out," he immediately let go of his hand and knelt down with a thud. He hugged Zhang Kongyun's leg and burst into tears. "Master, don't kick me out. Oh, this fool really cries when he wants to? He's even more troublesome than an Oscar winner." Zhang Kongyun was depressed in his heart. Zhang Kongyun glared at her. "Shut up. If you cry again, I'll really kick you out." Zhang's crying stopped abruptly. He stared at Zhang Kongyun with his eyes wide open, not daring to speak for a moment. Zhang Kongyun also stared at him and muttered to himself, "This guy can be really stupid sometimes, but he's not stupid at this moment." Was this guy really stupid or was he just pretending to be stupid? The two of them stared at each other for a while. Zhang Kongyun suddenly waved his hand impatiently and shouted, "Get up, get up. I can't walk if you hug my leg like this." Hardadef quickly let go of his hand, grabbed Zhang Kongyun's sleeve, and walked out with all his might. As he walked he shouted, "Master, let's go. Eldest senior sister is calling you." Zhang Kongyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shouted, "Let go of me. My sleeve is torn by you." At the door, Zhang Lufang saw them, one old and one young, one from a middle school, one from a foreign school, one from a foreign school, one from a native country, one from a foreign country, and the other from a foreign country. The short journey had caused them to spend a lot of time walking and stopping. She couldn't help but laugh so hard that her body shook. Zhang Kongyun was furious when he saw her like this. He was so angry that he glared at her and said, "You B*****starred girl, the second thing I regret in my life is that I listened to your nonsense and accepted this hateful foreigner as my disciple. Damn it, I'm so angry. Why did I have to be so soft-hearted in the first place?" Ever since they left Mount Longhu, Zhang Kongyun and Zhang Lufang had returned to their Taoist temple, and an endless nightmare had begun. Although Hardadef's body had gradually recovered, his brain was still not working well. The only thing he remembered most clearly was that as soon as he saw Zhang Kongyun, he had cried and shouted that he wanted to be his disciple. The most common action was to hug his thigh and cry loudly. It was fine if he just cried, but the key was that he had rubbed his tears and snot on Zhang Kongyun's leg. Zhang Kongyun was so disgusted that he wanted to burn his clothes and pants. Although Zhang Kongyun was a great cultivator and could easily avoid Hardadef's hug when he wanted to, he still had to eat, right? He had to sleep, right? He had to meditate and cultivate, right? God had pity on him. He was about to reach the immortal Jinshin. Every time he wanted to enter the realm of oneness of heaven and man, he would always meet this shameless guy by his side. He had gone to another mountain to meditate, but this B***starred foreigner had come to find him like a dog. Does a big nose have such an advantage? Is it a dog's nose? It was like a prostitute visiting a brothel. Every time he was about to enter the alley to seek pleasure, the anti-prostitution officers came. Once wasn't enough, but it was the same every single time. Who can be more miserable than me? When Zhang Kongyun thought of this, he burst into bitter tears. He wanted to howl to the sky and cry. In this case, after being harassed by Hardadef to the point that he wanted to die, he finally accepted Zhang Liufang's repeated requests to formally accept Hardadef as his disciple. Soon for this reason, the Jingyi school even held a large-scale apprenticeship ceremony. But after accepting his disciple, Zhang Kongyun thought that his life would be a little better. Unexpectedly, his nightmare had just begun. Just by participating in a succession ceremony, he had almost been tortured by Hardadef to the point of ascending to heaven and leaving his body. When Zhang Lufang heard Zhang Kongyun's scolding, she couldn't help but ask curiously, "The second thing you regret? Then what is the first thing you regret?" Zhang Kongyun's eyes bulged and he said angrily, "The first thing I regret is taking you as my disciple." Zhang Lufang suddenly said angrily, "Master, how can you say that? What does this have to do with me?" Zhang Kongyun glared at him and said, "If you hadn't saved this foreign devil, there wouldn't have been such a mess today. If you hadn't insisted that I accept him as my disciple, I wouldn't have been in such a mess. Damn it, it's really damn it. Cultivators don't cultivate. Instead they do all these dirty things. I'm so angry." Zhang Lufang laughed so hard that her whole body was twitching. She rubbed her cheeks hard with one hand and rubbed her stomach with the other. She squatted on the ground and said, "Master, this is your fate. You have to accept it." Zhang Kongyun was so angry that he wanted to beat his chest and stamp his feet. "How can you still gloat? What a wicked disciple." Hardadef didn't say anything. He just looked at them and smiled foolishly, not knowing that all this had happened because of him. Just as the three of them were entangled, two clear voices suddenly came from behind Zhang Lufang. "Shiji Lufang Shishu Kongyun?" Zhang Lufang looked back and saw that it was Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, both dressed in bright yellow Taoist robes. After they came to the Jingyi school, they had become Zhang Ling's disciples. Zhang Ling had entered the sect earlier than Zhang Kongyun in terms of cultivation, so in terms of seniority, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao called Zhang Kongyun Shishu. However, because Zhang Lufang was of the same generation as Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, she had entered the sect earlier than the two sisters, so they called her Shiji. However, because the two of them held the important position of Sword Soul in the Sanju formation, in order to show their unique strength and status, they were specially allowed to wear the golden Taoist robes with blue edges that only the great cultivators of the Jingyi school were qualified to wear. Originally, this was not in line with the etiquette of the Jingyi school, but Zhang Ling had always been protective and domineering. Although her cultivation was not the top master in the Jingyi school, she was of high seniority and had great prestige. In addition, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were very likable girls, so no one cared about this with them. Although Zhang Lufang was an authentic inner disciple of the Jingyi school, she was young, so her seniority was also low. It was rare for someone of her age to call her senior sister. Therefore, when she saw the two beautiful sword souls, she was so happy that she beamed with joy. "Ah, it's you guys." Zhang Lufang turned around with a giggle and greeted them warmly. Deng Yu blinked her eyes, looked at Zhang Lufang curiously, and said with a smile, "Shiji Lufang, why are you smiling so happily?" Just as Zhang Lufang was about to open her red lips, she saw Zhang Kongyun immediately glare at her, as if warning her that if she dared to tell anyone about this, she would immediately be expelled from the sect. Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Nothing. Junior sister Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, what are you doing here?" Deng Jiao was still very reserved and shy, as if it was very difficult for her to say a word or two to a girl of the same age. She looked softly at her sister and motioned for her to speak. Deng Yu did not stand on ceremony. She had always been a chatterbox. Deng Yu said with a smile, "Master asked us to urge you. All the Shishu and Shirbo have arrived. You're the only ones left." Zhang Lufang exclaimed, turned her head and shouted at Zhang Kongyun, "Master, it's all your fault. Everyone is here and only the three of us are left. Let's go." Ever since Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had arrived, Zhang Kongyun had turned around, lest the two little girls see his disheveled appearance. After tidying up for a while, he turned around and said to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao with a serious face, "Well, I see. Thank you for informing us. We'll go now." After that, he glared at Hardadef, then walked forward with his hands clasped behind his back, looking extremely dignified. But when he walked up to Zhang Lufang, he suddenly winked at her and whispered, "Hey, is my hat crooked?" Zhang Lufang took a look and found that Zhang Kongyun's head couldn't be more crooked, just like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. She suddenly burst into laughter, but she quickly restrained her smile and said seriously, "Master, you're very handsome." Zhang Kongyun looked at her suspiciously and supported his head with his hands, so his hat tilted from one side to the other. After struggling for a while, he finally felt relieved. He flicked his sleeves and walked out with a snort. John was engrossed in watching from the side. He also imitated Zhang Kongyun's posture and wore his hat crookedly. Then he flicked his sleeves and imitated Zhang Kongyun's way of walking and walked outside. When Zhang Kongyun heard the movement behind him, he turned his head and was immediately furious. He pointed at Hardadef and said, "You don't follow me?" Zhang Lufang immediately said angrily, "Master, Hardadef is your disciple. He's also a disciple of our Jingyi school. Why can't he go?" Zhang Kongyun was suddenly speechless. He snorted angrily, flicked his sleeves and left. Hardadef immediately followed suit. He flicked his sleeves, snorted and swaggered after him. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were watching from the side, wanted to laugh, but they didn't dare to. Their shoulders were trembling. When Zhang Kongyun walked far away, Zhang Lufang grabbed Deng Yu's arm and asked nervously and excitedly, "Hey, how many people came this time? How is it? Isn't it lively?" Deng Yu also became excited. "There are so many people. I've never seen so many cultivators gathered together. It's so lively. Come with us and have a look. Cultivators from many sects have come. I'm afraid there are thousands of people on the field." Zhang Lufang, on the other hand, was eager to see the world in chaos. Her eyes lit up and she excitedly took Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's hands and ran. As she ran, she asked, "Which sects and people have come? Tell me quickly." Deng Yu counted with his fingers and said seriously, 35 people from the Chuanjin Dragon sect have come, which is the most. 8 people from the Chuanjin Nanhua sect have come, 7 people from the Qingwei sect, and well, it seems that there are more than 20 people from the Jinshan sect. Zhang Liufang's pretty face was shining with excitement. "Are there any handsome men? Have you seen any handsome men?" Deng Yu was overjoyed as if he had found a kindred spirit. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, yes. Several of them are quite handsome." Zhang Lufang was also overjoyed. She laughed and said, "Wow, there are handsome men to look at. Hey, by the way, where's Superly? Where's your classmate Superly? Is he here? Headache, I can't update the 3rd chapter today. I still owe you 2 chapters. Please rest assured I will make up for it." Chapter 683. At the mention of Superly, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao immediately stopped in their tracks. They were curious and puzzled. At the same time, they looked at Zhang Lufang in surprise and asked, "Shiji Lufang, is Li Yundong also coming to the ceremony today?" Zhang Lufang also stopped and looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao strangely. "Don't you know? Li Yundong has a good relationship with Jinren Ziyuan. There's no reason for him not to come." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other. Deng Yu said, "I don't know. We didn't see Li Yundong." A look of disappointment flashed across Zhang Liufang's face. "Ah? Superly didn't come? It's so boring. Then there's nothing to see." Deng Yu blinked her eyes and persuaded, "Senior Sister Lufang, maybe he'll be here when we go again?" Zhang Liufang's face lit up with joy. Yes, what you said makes sense. Let's hurry up." The 3 of them chattered all the way and ran quickly. It didn't take long for them to arrive at a Taoist temple on a side peak of Mount Longhu. The scale of this Taoist temple was not very large, and its outer wall was only about 1 meter high. It had white walls and black tiles, and there were 4 huge silk paintings hanging on the wall. These paintings were of the 4 great divine beasts: azure dragon, vermilion bird, white tiger, and black tortoise. At the entrance of the Taoist temple, there were 4 statues of gods in golden armor. They were majestic, as if they had descended from the sky and were lifelike. After Zhang Lufang, Deng Yu, and Deng Jiao arrived, they stopped talking and followed Zhang Kongyun obediently, but they couldn't help looking around curiously. In order to welcome the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect, the Jingyi school had specially sealed the mountain early. In order to prevent some tourists from entering by mistake from disturbing the ceremony, they had chosen a relatively remote Taoist temple on a side peak. Fortunately, Mount Longhu was a Taoist holy land, and there were Taoist temples everywhere. Although the arrangement of the Jingyi school was sudden, it did not affect the ceremony. After Zhang Lufang and the others entered the gate of the Taoist temple, they suddenly saw a vast expanse of flat ground in the Taoist temple. The field was paved with green bricks. On the east side of the field was a rather majestic Taoist temple pavilion. Inside the pavilion were worshipped Heavenly Primogenitor Lingbao, and Heavenly Primogenitor Daoda. Outside the pavilion was a statue of Celestial Master Zhang. In front of the statue was a huge bronze tripod. Inside the tripod was an incense stick as thick as a person's forearm. When the incense stick was lit in the field, green smoke curled up in spirals. However, it magically gathered and did not disperse. "You almost there?" After Zhang Lufang followed Zhang Kongyun to the field, she looked around curiously. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao saw that Zhang Ling, Zhou Ping, and the others were busy socializing with people from other sects and didn't have a chance to talk to them. They stayed in front of Zhang Lufang and asked curiously in a low voice, "Shiji Lufang, are there so many cultivators in our country? I really didn't know before." Zhang Lufang said with a smile, "Of course. Although it's the age of chaos now, the country has been relatively lax in recent years, so the number of people has slowly increased. Moreover, only the senior masters and the best of the younger generation from each sect have come. They are all 1 in 100 figures. It's a pity that you didn't go to the Taoist assembly last time. If you had, you would have seen more young masters. This time there are more seniors from various sections. TSK, I didn't see any handsome guys. It's boring." Deng Yu asked curiously, "Are there many young masters at the Taoist assembly?" Zhang Lufang looked around and replied, "Of course, this is a meeting specially set up for the masters of the younger generation in the cultivation world to make a name for themselves." Deng Yu asked curiously, "Is there anyone among the young masters who is more powerful than Li Jiandong?" Zhang Lufang laughed and said, "If they are more powerful than Super Li, can Super Li still be considered invincible? Of course they are not as powerful as him." Although Deng Yu already knew these things, when she heard others praise her former classmate and her savior, she was overjoyed as if others were praising her. She thought of the prestige of Super Li and couldn't help but think of his mighty figure at the Taoist assembly. She couldn't help but be fascinated. It's a pity that he didn't come. If only he had come. It's said that he is an invincible master. I really want to see how invincible he is. Her sister, Deng Jiao, was shy and had not spoken, but when she heard this, her eyes couldn't help lighting up. She was in a trance, as if she couldn't wait to go back to the day of the Taoist assembly and see Li Jiandong's divine power. Zhang Lufang also sighed. After looking around, she pursed her lips and said, "It's boring. I've seen all the handsome guys who came. They are nothing more than Yu Sheng and the others from the Chuanjian Dragon sect. It's boring." As she spoke, she heard a voice coming from the side. "Hey, you guys are praising Li Jiandong like a flower. Is it necessary?" When Zhang Lufang, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao heard this voice, they turned their heads and saw a woman wearing a short red robe with a long blue gown inside, and a short black Taoist crown on her head looking at them with an unconvinced expression. Zhang Lufang could tell at a glance that the woman in front of her was dressed in the Taoist robe of the Maoshan sect, and this pretty woman was Mao Yuchang, the daughter of the leader of the Maoshan sect. Because of the mystical silver fox, the Taoism of the north and the south of China had once led to a 10-year war. This war had swept through China's Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism, from the royal family to the common people. No one had been spared. Although 1,000 years had passed and the Taoism of the north and the south were no longer as incompatible as before, the gap in gaps still existed. As the only northern force among the 3 mountains of Taoism, the Maoshan sect naturally assumed the role of the mainstay of the Taoism of the north of China, resisting the continuous invasion of the southern Taoism forces led by the Jingyi sect. It was precisely because of the uneven distribution of the Taoist forces in the north and the south that the forces in the north were weaker than those in the south. Therefore, the Taoist sects in the north had always been on the defensive in a very low-key manner. Whether it was the siege of Mount Tianlong, the Taoist assembly, or the pill-seizing battle on Mount Gizhou and Tiandu Peak, they had not sent anyone to participate. Even the cultivators of their sects had rarely been involved in the world. Therefore, Mao Yuchang, who had been strictly controlled by her father and almost never walked in the secular world, had only heard of Li Yundong's name, but had never seen him. In addition, she was also a talented cultivator of the younger generation, and her conceit was no less than that of Zi Yuan. Naturally, she was not convinced by Li Yundong. Zhang Lufang looked at Mao Yuchang and saw that the daughter of the leader of the Maoshan sect was born with a face as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as the moon. She was even prettier than herself, which attracted the attention of many young cultivators in the sect. She secretly pouted and said indifferently, so it's a fellow Taoist of Maoshan's sect. Sorry for not recognizing you. Seeing that Zhang Lufang didn't like her, Mao Yuchang was also extremely proud. She snorted and said, if he is really invincible, Li, why didn't he come? Didn't they say that he has a good relationship with Ziyuan? As far as I know, during the succession ceremony, there will be a battle competition to see if the new sect leader has the qualifications to take over the position of sect leader. If I remember correctly, it seems that you can invite people to help you out. What? He didn't even come to such an open and above-board event. How dare he call himself invincible? Could it be that he's afraid? Zhang Lufang snorted and turned her head away. Whether he's invincible or not, you'll know after you fight with him. Don't blame me for not reminding you, he is now a Jinshin master. Mao Yuchang curled her lips and said, what's so great about a Jinshin master? I can still win. I'm afraid that he won't come. Hearing her exaggeration, Zhang Lufang couldn't help but be shocked. She turned her head to look at her carefully and thought to herself, no way, Mao Yuchang has also reached the Jinshin phase? It doesn't look like it. While she was wondering, she heard a man's voice coming from the side. Yuchang, what are you saying? Don't be presumptuous. Zhang Lufang looked over and saw a middle-aged man coming to Mao Yuchang and shouting at her in a low voice. Then the middle-aged man turned his head and smiled at Zhang Lufang. He saluted and said, my niece is a little naughty and arrogant. Please don't mind her, Jinren Zhang. Before Zhang Lufang could say anything, Zhang Kongyun said to the middle-aged man with a smile, it turns out to be Jinren Su Yangzi. Why didn't your leader Jinren Buzhou come? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were curious, so they whispered to Zhang Lufang, who is this Su Yangzi? Who is Jinren Buzhou? Zhang Lufang also whispered, Su Yangzi is the elder brother of the leader of Maoshan sect. His name is Mao Jian, and Jinren Buzhou is the leader of the Maoshan sect. Only now did Deng Yu and Deng Jiao realize what was going on. They turned to look at Su Yangzi and listened to their conversation. Su Yangzi smiled and said to Zhang Kongyun, our leader is in closed-door cultivation and can't get away, so I had to come on his behalf. Zhang Liufang's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately looked at the scene. She exclaimed and thought to herself, it's strange. Why haven't the leaders of the other sects come? It's so strange. Hey, the leader of the Qingqing sect is here, but apart from him, none of the leaders of the other sects are here. This is too strange, isn't it? Zhang Kongyun didn't know what she was thinking. He smiled and returned the salute to Su Yangzi, saying, I see. When we go back, please say hello to Jinren Buzhou. After exchanging some pleasantries with him, Su Yangzi glared at Mao Yuchang, then pulled her aside and scolded her in a low voice, what did I tell you before we came out? Is that something you can say just now? There are so many cultivation seniors and heroic experts here. Do you think it's your turn to be so arrogant? Mao Yuchang was not surprised. She pursed her lips and said, really? But why haven't I seen any experts come? The strongest is only at the intermediate level of the golden body. What the hell? I thought I could see a great master of lightning retribution. What a disappointment. Humph, I wanted to meet Li Yunyang, but he didn't even dare to come. I hate him. Su Yangzi glared at her, but Mao Yuchang seemed to be used to it and was not afraid at all. He could only shake his head helplessly and say, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Forget it, I don't care about you. You'll know after you suffer a few losses. Mao Yuchang giggled and said, the person who can make me suffer a loss hasn't been born yet. Not far away, Zhang Lufang looked at Mao Yuchang and whispered to Zhang Kongyun, Master, is this Mao Yuchang a Jinshin master? Why don't I think so? If she's not a Jinshin master, how could she be so arrogant? Zhang Kongyun glanced at Mao Yuchang and smiled. She's young and impetuous. It's understandable. Besides, is it strange that the daughter of the leader of the Maoshan sect is a Jinshin master? Zhang Lufang asked curiously, aren't there only 4 Duan Jindan in the past 200 or 300 years? How did she cultivate to the Jinshin phase? Zhang Kongyun laughed and said, as the mainstay of the northern forces, the Maoshan sect has been competing with our southern Taoist sects for so many years, so its foundation is naturally very deep. Moreover, which sect doesn't have a special way to cultivate the Jinshin? Didn't Wang Yuanshan also break through to the Jinshin? Didn't I also break through to the Jinshin? No Duan Jindan? Throw it with money. Throw it with medicine. With the unique cultivation method and financial resources of the Maoshan sect, you think you can't make a Jinshin master? Do you believe it? As he said this, Zhang Kongyun stroked his beard and narrowed his eyes at Mao Yuchang. However, Not everyone can rely on money and medicine to reach the Jinshin phase. It's impossible without rare talent. Otherwise, why didn't Wang Jinyuan of Mount Gazao use money and medicine to make himself a Jinshin? No matter what, since Mao Yuchang dared to be so arrogant, she must have something up her sleeve. Zhang Lufang snorted. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly saw two people slowly walking over. One of them was wearing a red Taoist robe with blue edges. The Taoist robe was inlaid with an azure dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. The other was wearing a bright yellow Taoist robe with blue edges. The Taoist robe was inlaid with a majestic vermilion bird. These two people were none other than Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.